Sunlight streamed through the high windows of the National Armor Museum, casting golden rectangles across the polished floor. Colonel William Bill Harrison stood motionless before the Sherman M4A3E8, his weathered hand resting on its cool metal track. At 83, his once commanding frame had diminished, but his spine remained soldier straight, a habit formed through decades of military bearing that even time couldn't bend. The tank loomed before him, a behemoth of olive drab steel, both familiar and distant. 78 years had passed since he'd commanded one just like it across the battlefields of Europe. Standing here, the decades compressed into nothing. The smell of diesel and gun oil seemed to rise from his memory, vivid as if he were still cramped in that steel coffin, rolling toward uncertainty. "Sir, Colonel Harrison?" Bill turned to face a young woman with earnest eyes holding a digital recorder. Behind her stood 3 college students clutching notebooks, looking at him with that peculiar mix of curiosity and reverence that always made him uncomfortable. "I'm Sarah Chen from Georgetown University. We spoke about the oral history project?" He nodded. "Of course, punctual. Good quality in a historian. The curator mentioned you specifically requested to meet here," she said, gesturing to the tank. His eyes returned to the Sherman. Some conversation should happen face to face. Sarah nodded, though Bill knew she couldn't truly understand. How could she? These children had grown up in a world of glass and light. They couldn't fathom the weight of these war machines, the way they'd defined the lives of an entire generation now fading into history. They settled on a bench opposite the tank, the students arranging themselves around him like eager grandchildren at story time. "Let's start with the basics," said Sarah. "When did you join the Army?" Bill chuckled, a sound like dry leaves. "Young lady, there's nothing basic about war. Nothing simple about the men who fight it." He leaned forward, eyes fixed on the Sherman's gun barrel. "If you want to understand the tank, you need to understand the men inside it. And to understand them, you need to know what forged them." He paused, gathering memories like scattered photographs. "I was 22 when I volunteered in 1943. A boy from Dayton, Ohio, who thought he knew something about machines because his father ran a mechanic shop called Thunderbolt Motors." His eyes took on a faraway look. "Turns out I knew nothing at all." Chapter 2. Baptism of Fire. Fort Knox, Kentucky, 1943. The summer heat pressed down like a blanket, turning the training grounds into a furnace that cooked the inside of the tanks until they were hot enough to fry eggs on the hulls. Private First Class William Harrison wiped sweat from his brow as he studied the field manual for the M4 Sherman tank. Around him, the sprawling training base hummed with activity, a vast machine tooled for one purpose: creating tankers who could face the German war machine and survive. "Harrison, front and center!" He snapped to attention as Staff Sergeant Reynolds approached, the man's face perpetually set in a scowl that had terrorized 3 cycles of recruits. "Tell me about the M4's weak points." Harrison swallowed. "Side armor, sir, only 38mm thick. Vulnerable to German 75mm guns at range. And the engine compartment, sir, gasoline-powered, can ignite if penetrated." Reynolds stopped, inches from Harrison's face. "And yet you volunteered for the armor division. Are you stupid, son, or just eager to die?" Harrison met the sergeant's gaze. "Neither, sir. I believe in American engineering and American tankers." 3 months into training, during a night exercise, a tank commanded by Lieutenant Prescott rolled into a ravine, crushing the commander as he attempted to evacuate. The next morning, Harrison was summoned to the company commander's office. Major Anderson didn't look up from his paperwork. "Your instructors say you have a natural feel for armor tactics. Reynolds says you're not completely useless." High praise coming from him. "Thank you, sir. We're shipping out in 3 weeks. Lieutenant Prescott's death leaves us short-handed on tank commanders." Anderson finally looked up. "Congratulations, Sergeant Harrison. You've just been promoted." That night, Harrison couldn't sleep. 4 other men would ride into battle with him, trusting his judgment, his reflexes, his decisions. In the moonlight, he studied their files. Corporal Jack Donovan, 26, gunner, former hunting guide from Montana. Private First Class Miguel Rodriguez, 19, loader, son of Mexican immigrants from Texas. Technician 5th grade Frank Miller, 24, driver, former auto mechanic from Detroit. Private Jimmy Chen, 20, assistant driver bow gunner, engineering student from San Francisco. Strangers now, soon to be the closest thing to family any of them would know. The next day, Harrison approached the 4 men in the mess hall. They fell silent as he sat down. "Gentlemen," Harrison nodded, I thought we might get acquainted. Jack Donovan, the gunner, looked up with cool blue eyes set in a weather-beaten face. We know who you are, Sergeant. The officer they made from spare parts after Prescott bought it. Harrison met his gaze. That's right, and you're the hunting guide who can supposedly hit a moving deer at 500 yards. A flicker of surprise crossed Donovan's face. I read your files, Harrison continued. Today, I just want to know one thing from each of you. What's your greatest fear about going into combat? The question landed like a grenade. Chen answered first, letting you all down. Miller nodded. Fire. I've seen cars burn. Men burn differently. Rodriguez fidgeted with his fork. Dying for nothing. Donovan finally spoke. Indecision. Freezing when it matters. Harrison nodded slowly. Mine is making a decision that gets all of you killed. He stood up. Now we know. See you at 0600. 3 days later, they were assigned their tank, an M4A1 Sherman fresh from the assembly line, its olive drab paint still glossy. What are we calling her? Miller asked. Widowmaker, Rodriguez suggested with dark humor. Thunderbolt, Harrison said firmly. It was the name of my father's shop. He built it from nothing after the Depression, said a thunderbolt was powerful but precise. Destruction with purpose. The name was painted on that afternoon, white letters stark against the dark hull. The day before shipping out to England, Harrison found Donovan alone, meticulously cleaning his sidearm. Why do you doubt me, Donovan? I need to know before we ship out. Donovan set the pistol down. Because you're young, because they rushed your training, because I've got 6 years on you and half your authority. Age doesn't guarantee wisdom. No, but it damn well guarantees experience. Donovan finally looked at him. I've seen men die in the mountains. Nature doesn't forgive mistakes. Neither will the Germans. Harrison nodded. Fair enough, but I'm not asking to be your superior. Just your commander. There's a difference. And what's that exactly? A superior expects obedience without question. A commander earns trust by making decisions worth following. Harrison held out his hand. I don't need you to believe in me yet. Just give me the chance to earn it. After a long moment, Donovan took his hand. We'll see what you're made of soon enough. Chapter: The Weight of Steel. The English training grounds were a muddy purgatory, the constant drizzle turning everything to a cold, wet misery. Harrison studied maps of the French coast until he could draw them from memory, pored over intelligence reports about German defenses and panzer divisions. One evening, as Harrison reviewed gunnery reports, a shadow fell across his desk. He looked up to find a gray-haired colonel examining the model Sherman tank Harrison had been using to visualize tactics. You've made modifications to the model, the colonel observed, pointing to pieces of putty Harrison had added. Harrison stood quickly. Sir? Yes, sir. I was exploring potential field improvements. At ease, Sergeant. The colonel picked up the model. You've reinforced the ammunition storage areas. Good instinct. The Sherman's tendency to brew up when hit there has been noted. He set the model down. I'm Colonel James Montgomery. I've been reviewing your training evaluations. Harrison tensed. His unorthodox approaches had raised eyebrows among the traditional instructors. Your crew has the third best gunnery scores in the company, despite having one of the least experienced commanders. Montgomery's tone revealed nothing. Your maneuvering strategies, however, have been flagged as excessively aggressive and potentially insubordinate. Harrison chose his words carefully. The exercises presume conventional approaches, sir. I believe the Germans will have prepared for those. We need to be unpredictable, even if it means disobeying direct orders. In the exercises, sir, my priority was accomplishing the mission while preserving my crew. If that's insubordination, I accept the consequence. Montgomery studied him for a long moment, then unexpectedly smiled. Walk with me, Sergeant. Outside, the evening air was crisp with early spring. Other units conducted night training in the distance, the occasional flare illuminating the landscape in harsh white light. What do you know about German tanks, Harrison? They're generally superior to ours in armor and firepower, sir. The Panzer IV has a high-velocity 75mm gun that can penetrate our frontal armor at combat ranges. The new Panthers and Tigers are even more formidable. Montgomery nodded. And yet, we're sending you into battle in Shermans. Does that strike you as a poor strategy? Harrison hesitated. It's not my place to question. It's precisely your place, Sergeant. Not publicly, not insubordinately, but here, now with me. Speak freely. Harrison took a breath. The Sherman has advantages. It's reliable, mechanically simple, and we can produce them in enormous numbers. But man for man, tank for tank, we're outgunned. Exactly. Montgomery stopped walking. We're not winning this war with superior weapons, Harrison. We're winning it with superior logistics, industrial capacity, and men who can adapt. He fixed Harrison with an intense stare. Your instincts to protect your crew while accomplishing the mission, those aren't flaws. They're exactly what we need. The invasion is coming soon, Montgomery continued. Your orders will be to support infantry, establish beachheads, push inland. Textbook stuff. He lowered his voice. But what you'll actually face is chaos. Communication breakdown, officers killed, plans rendered obsolete in seconds. Harrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. When that happens, Montgomery continued, I want men like you making decisions. Men who understand that rigid adherence to failing plans costs lives. As Montgomery walked away, Harrison called after him. Sir, you've seen combat against German armor. The colonel turned. North Africa, lost 2 tanks, lost friends. His expression darkened. Remember this, Harrison. The Germans have better tanks. We have more tanks. Your job is to make sure that equation balances in our favor. That night, Harrison gathered his crew. They sat on ammunition crates in the motor pool, the Thunderbolt looming behind them like a silent witness. I've learned some things about what we're facing, Harrison began. I won't lie to you, the German tanks outclass ours. Their armor is thicker, their guns more powerful. Chen shifted uncomfortably. Rodriguez cursed under his breath. But we have advantages they don't. We're more mobile. Our turret traverses faster. We're more reliable mechanically. And we have something else. He looked at each man in turn. We have each other. 5 men who think and act as one. What are you suggesting exactly? Donovan asked. I'm suggesting we forget the textbook when it doesn't serve us. We fight smarter, not harder. Harrison pulled out chalk and began drawing on the floor. The Germans expect us to come straight at them. So we don't. We use terrain, smoke, our mobility to get angles they don't expect. Hit and run, like guerrilla tactics, but with tanks. Miller nodded. Exactly. We never give them a clean shot if we can help it. Rodriguez looked skeptical. That's not how they trained us. No, Harrison agreed. It's how we'll survive. The night before embarkation, Harrison found Jimmy Chen sitting alone by the tank, writing in a small notebook. Letter home? Harrison asked. Chen nodded. My mother still thinks I'm at an engineering school. Harrison sat beside him. My father asked me not to volunteer, said I was needed at the shop. He looked up at the stars. I told him fixing engines in Ohio wouldn't help end the war. He said, neither will dying in Europe. Are you scared, Sarge? Chen asked. Yes, Harrison answered without hesitation. But not of dying exactly, of failing, of making a decision that gets you all killed. You won't, Chen said with surprising conviction. You think 3 steps ahead. Harrison smiled slightly. Why tank corps? You could have gone officer track with your education. Harrison considered the question. My father builds things that last, cars that run for decades. I wanted to build something too. Not a tank, they're just steel. But a crew, men who trust each other. That lasts even after the war. Chen nodded slowly. Well, you've started building. Let's see if it holds together under fire. Chapter 4, Day of Reckoning. June 6, 1944. The sea churned with the largest armada ever assembled. The Thunderbolt crew waited in the belly of an LST, landing ship tank, the thunder of naval bombardment vibrating through the hull. Hey, Sarge, Rodriguez called. You think the Krauts know we're coming? A nervous laugh rippled through the tankers. I think they've got a pretty good idea, Harrison replied. But they don't know about the Thunderbolt yet. Miller, already in the driver's seat, ran through his pre-operation checklist with mechanical precision. Donovan cleaned his personal sidearm, a ritual that seemed to calm him. Chen sat with eyes closed, lips moving silently in what might have been prayer. A naval officer appeared at the tank deck. 30 minutes to landing zone. Start your engines. The roar of 24 Sherman engines filled the cavernous space. Through the open bow doors, Harrison could see other landing craft heading toward shore, disgorging men and vehicles into a maelstrom of fire and smoke. Listen up, Harrison shouted over the intercom. We stick to the plan, support infantry, clear obstacles, establish the beachhead. But if things go sideways, we improvise. Keep your heads on a swivel. Questions? There were none, just tense nods. The LST ground to a halt. With a mechanical groan, the bow doors fully opened, revealing the chaos of Utah Beach. Despite the naval bombardment, German artillery still pounded the shoreline. Bodies floated in the reddened surf. But unlike the slaughter unfolding at Omaha Beach miles away, Utah's landing zones were partially secured, with infantry already pushing inland. "Driver forward," Harrison commanded. The Thunderbolt lurched forward, treads spinning before finding purchase. Water sloshed up to the hull as they descended the ramp. Miller guided the tank with steady hands, following partly submerged markers through mined waters. As they reached the beach, Harrison scanned the battlefield. Concrete bunkers dotted the shore, some still firing, others silenced by naval guns. Infantry crouched behind whatever cover they could find. "Gunner, bunker at 2 o'clock, range 800 yards, Harrison directed. "He round." "Identified," Donovan confirmed. "On the way." The 75-millimeter gun roared, sending a high-explosive shell smashing into the bunker's firing port. Concrete dust exploded outward as the bunker fell silent. "Good hit, driver. Advance to phase line Alpha." The Sherman ground forward, crushing barbed wire and obstacles. Other tanks formed up alongside them, creating a moving wall of steel to protect the infantry following behind. Artillery shells whistled overhead, some landing close enough to spray sand against the hull. For Harrison, the next hours passed in a blur of constant movement, split-second decisions, and unrelenting tension. They knocked out 2 more bunkers, helped clear a minefield, and provided cover for infantry clearing trenches. The beach was secured, but the real battle lay inland, where German forces were regrouping. By nightfall, the Thunderbolt crew was exhausted but intact. They established a defensive position in a small Norman village 2 miles inland. Harrison climbed down from the turret, his legs stiff from hours of standing. The other crewmen emerged one by one, stretching cramped muscles, their faces streaked with grime. "We made it," Chen said quietly, wonder in his voice. "First day," Donovan corrected. "Long way to Berlin." Rodriguez produced cigarettes, offering them around. Even Chen, who didn't smoke, took one. "You did good, Sarge," Miller said. "Got us through in one piece." A lieutenant approached with a map. "Sergeant Harrison, command wants your tank at point tomorrow. We're pushing toward Carentan at 0600. Intelligence reports Panzer elements in the area." After the lieutenant left, the crew looked to Harrison. "Panzer IVs?" asked Chen nervously. "Probably," Harrison admitted. "Maybe worse." Rodriguez spat. "Worse like tigers? Those monsters can hit us from a mile away." "And we'll be at point," Donovan added grimly. "First to be seen, first to be hit." Harrison studied their faces, seeing the fear return. "Listen, yes, German tanks have better guns, better armor. That's a fact. But we're still standing after day 1 when plenty of others aren't. Why? Because we work together, we adapt, we don't expose ourselves unnecessarily." He picked up a stick and drew in the dirt. "Tomorrow we'll use the hedgerows for cover. We'll use smoke when we need to move. We'll coordinate with our infantry. Most importantly, we'll never give them a clean shot if we can help it." As the others headed for the field kitchen, Donovan lingered. "Just wondering if you believe all that," Donovan said bluntly. "About using tactics to overcome their technical advantage? Absolutely. And if we encounter a tiger?" Harrison was silent for a moment. "Then we call in air support, artillery, whatever we need. We don't play their game, we make them play ours." Donovan nodded. "Fair enough. For what it's worth, you did well today, better than I expected." Alone by the tank, Harrison finally allowed his hands to tremble as he took out a small notebook and began writing by flashlight. "Dear Father, we made it through D-Day. The Sherman is everything they said. Reliable, maneuverable, adequately armed for infantry support. But tomorrow we face German armor. I won't sugarcoat it. They have us outgunned. The Panzer IV can penetrate our armor from ranges where our rounds might bounce off theirs. And if we encounter tigers or panthers, well, I'm grateful for our mobility. I keep thinking about what you taught me. It's not just about having the best tools. It's about knowing how to use the tools you have. I'm trying to apply that wisdom here. If I don't make it home, know that I believe in what we're fighting for. And I believe in these men I'm privileged to lead. They're becoming the brothers I never had. Your son, Bill." He looked up at the stars, the same stars visible over Ohio, over his father's shop. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Tonight they had survived. Sometimes that had to be enough. Chapter 5. Steel against steel. Dawn broke misty and cool over the Norman countryside. The Thunderbolt's engine rumbled to life, joining the mechanical chorus of an armored column preparing to advance. Harrison stood in the turret, map in hand, conferring with infantry officers about the day's objectives. Their goal was to secure a crossroads village controlling access to Carentan. "Infantry reports German armor in these woods," the company commander indicated. Probably Panzer IVs, maybe some Stugs. Your Sherman will lead our column with infantry support. Harrison studied the terrain. The road wound through classic Norman bocage country, small fields divided by ancient hedgerows so dense they could stop a tank. Perfect ambush territory. Sir, request permission to advance along this parallel farm track instead, Harrison suggested. It's less direct but offers better visibility. The captain considered, then shook his head. Negative. Engineers report the bridge here is likely destroyed. Main road is our only option. Proceed with caution. Harrison returned to the Thunderbolt. We're at point, heading for Brayville on the main road. Load armor piercing. Be ready for ambush in those hedgerows. The column moved out, advancing cautiously through the misty landscape. Harrison stood in the turret hatch, binoculars scanning constantly. Beside the road, infantry advanced in loose formation, using ditches and hedges for cover. An hour passed, covering barely 2 miles of hostile territory. Sarge, infantry is signaling a halt, Chen called. Harrison raised his fist, the column stopping immediately. Ahead, scouts waved urgently from a hedgerow. Driver, hold position. Donovan, traverse right. Cover that tree line. Harrison grabbed his Thompson and carefully exited the tank, staying low as he moved to confer with the infantry lieutenant. My scouts spotted movement in the orchard ahead, the lieutenant reported. Something big. They're dug in behind that stone wall. Harrison studied the orchard through his binoculars. The morning mist still clung to the ground. Then he saw it, the unmistakable angular shape of a German tank turret protruding from behind a stone wall, the long barrel of its 75mm gun barely visible. Panzer IV, Harrison confirmed. Looks like they're waiting to ambush us. Can your Sherman take it out from here? Harrison calculated angles and distances. If we advance another 50 yards, we'll have a clear shot at their flank, but they'll see us moving. I've got a bazooka team. They could try to get closer through that drainage ditch. Too risky. That Panzer would cut them down. Harrison made a quick decision. Have your men lay smoke. We'll use it to advance to firing position. The plan set, Harrison returned to the Thunderbolt, quickly briefing his crew. Panzer IV in the orchard, dug in behind a stone wall. We're going to advance under smoke cover to get a flank shot. He looked at each man. This is it, our first tank-on-tank engagement. Rodriguez crossed himself. Chen's knuckles whitened on his machine gun grips. Donovan's face showed only calm concentration. Miller spoke for them all. We're ready, Sarge. White smoke billowed from grenades thrown by the infantry. Harrison dropped into the turret, securing the hatch above him. Driver, forward, slow and steady. The Sherman lurched forward into the artificial fog. Inside, visibility was reduced to what Harrison could see through his periscope, a ghostly white world with vague shadows. The crew was silent, each man focused entirely on his task. 20 yards. 30. Harrison counted down the distance. Ready on the gun. We'll have seconds once we clear the smoke. Through the periscope, Harrison saw the smoke thinning. The stone wall came into view, and behind it the Panzer IV. Its turret was still facing the road, expecting targets from a different direction. Target Panzer IV, 2 o'clock. Range 150 yards, Harrison called. Gunner, traverse right. The turret swung with agonizing slowness. The Panzer crew, suddenly alerted to the threat, began turning their own turret. On target, Donovan reported, voice tight. Fire. The 75mm gun thundered. Through his periscope, Harrison watched the armor-piercing shell strike the Panzer's side armor just below the turret ring, a perfect hit. But the German tank didn't explode. It didn't even stop moving. Its turret continued to rotate toward them. No penetration, Harrison shouted. Driver, reverse. Gunner, fire again. Miller threw the Sherman into reverse as Donovan fired a second round. This one struck lower on the hull, sending sparks flying but still not penetrating. The angle's too shallow, Donovan reported frantically. Their armor is deflecting our shots. The Panzer's gun was now aimed directly at them. Harrison knew they had seconds before it fired. Hard right, he ordered Miller. Get behind that hedgerow. The Sherman pivoted sharply, treads churning mud as it sought cover. They were halfway to safety when the world exploded around them. The Panzer's 75mm shell struck the front right side of the Sherman, the impact throwing Harrison against the turret wall. His head struck metal, vision blurring momentarily. Smoke filled the compartment as electrical systems shorted. Status! Harrison shouted, ears ringing from the blast. Tracks hit, Miller reported. We're immobilized. Gun still operational, Shish, Donovan added, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. Bowgun working. No fire yet, Chen reported. I'm okay, Rodriguez strained. Just got thrown against the breach, ready to load. Harrison quickly assessed their situation. Immobilized but still fighting, partially concealed by the hedgerow, but in imminent danger from the Panzer, which would surely maneuver for a killing shot. Donovan, can you get a bead on their track from here? Negative. Need them to advance about 15 yards. Harrison made a split-second decision. Chen, target the orchard with the bow gun. Make them think we're incapacitated. Chen fired the .30 caliber machine gun into the orchard, bullets sparking off the Panzer's frontal armor harmlessly, but creating an impression of desperate, ineffective resistance. The gambit worked. The Panzer, believing the Sherman crippled and panicking, began to advance for a clear killing shot, moving precisely where Donovan needed it. Come on, Harrison whispered. A little more. I've got their track, Donovan called. Fire! The Sherman's gun roared again. This time the shell struck the Panzer's drive sprocket, shattering it in a shower of metal. The German tank lurched to a halt, its right track damaged beyond immediate repair. Now both tanks were immobilized, their guns still lethal, locked in a duel to the death. Load he, Harrison ordered. He up, Rodriguez confirmed, slamming the round into the breech. Aim for their vision slits, blind them. Donovan adjusted his aim and fired. The high explosive round detonated against the Panzer's front glacis, not penetrating but filling the German tank with spall, fragments of metal flaking off the interior surface from the impact. Before the Germans could recover, American infantry swarmed forward, a bazooka team flanking the disabled Panzer. Their rocket struck the German tank from behind, igniting its ammunition in a catastrophic explosion that sent its turret cartwheeling through the air. In the sudden silence that followed, Harrison exhaled shakily. Everyone still okay? Affirmatives came from each man, though Rodriguez was nursing bruised ribs and Donovan's cut still bled freely. Harrison opened the hatch and surveyed the damage to their tank. The right track was mangled beyond field repair. They would need a recovery vehicle to get Thunderbolt operational again. As he watched the burning Panzer, Harrison felt no elation, only grim satisfaction at survival. They had faced German armor and lived, barely. The enemy crew had not been so fortunate. Infantry approached, the lieutenant grinning. Hell of a job, Harrison. You drew them out perfectly. Harrison nodded, accepting the praise without sharing the fear that still coursed through him. We'll need a recovery team. Radio back that we've destroyed one Panzer IV, but Thunderbolt is immobilized. Later, as they waited for the recovery team, the crew gathered beside their damaged tank, smoking in silence, each man processing his own thoughts about their first taste of armored combat. Miller broke the silence. They nearly had us. But they didn't, Harrison pointed out. We adapted. We survived. This time, Donovan said soberly, their guns should have penetrated us easily. We got lucky with the angle. Harrison didn't disagree. We'll need more than luck against Panthers or Tigers. Their 88 mm guns will go through our armor like butter. So what do we do? Chen asked, the youngest and most visibly shaken by the encounter. Harrison met each man's eyes in turn. We learn, we improve. We never fight on their terms. He pointed to the burning Panzer. We beat them by being smarter, not by being stronger. And we stick together. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. That's it? That's your grand strategy? For now, Harrison acknowledged, until we get a better one. He stood up. Help's coming. Let's get our gear together. As the others collected their equipment, Donovan stayed beside Harrison. You did well, the older man said quietly. Use their confidence against them. Smart. Thanks, Harrison replied, surprised by the compliment. But, Donovan continued, his voice dropping further, sooner or later we're going to meet something we can't outthink. A tiger, a panther, something that can kill us before we even know it's there. He looked intently at Harrison. What then? Harrison had no ready answer, and Donovan didn't wait for one. The question hung in the air between them, an uncomfortable truth neither could dismiss. That night, as they bivouacked with a replacement tank being readied, Harrison wrote again to his father. Today we faced our first Panzer. We won, but barely. Their tank was better than ours in almost every way that matters. We survived through tactics and a measure of luck. Both resources that deplete with time. I worry that's what we're doing here, patching and hoping, knowing the machine is fundamentally flawed. Yet these men trust me to bring them through. I have to believe there's a way forward that doesn't end in burning steel. Tomorrow we try again. We have to be better, smarter, more cohesive. The alternative is unthinkable. Your son, Bill, he sealed the letter, knowing it might never be sent. that it might become just another personal effect returned to a grieving family. They had survived today. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. One day at a time, one battle at a time, it was the only way forward. Chapter 6. The Crucible. 3 weeks after D-Day, the hedgerow country of Normandy had become a bloody chessboard of advance and retreat. The Thunderbolt crew had survived 2 more engagements with German armor, another Panzer IV, and a Stoogie 3 assault gun, emerging victorious but increasingly aware of their vulnerability. Harrison sat in the turret of their tank, now repainted with the Thunderbolt name after repairs, studying a map by flashlight. Their company had lost 4 Shermans in the past week alone, with only 1 crew surviving. The mathematics of attrition weighed heavily on him. Captain Lewis, their company commander, appeared beside the tank. "Division's planning a major push tomorrow, breaking out of this damn hedgerow country onto open ground." Harrison nodded. The terrain had favored the defenders, allowing German forces to inflict disproportionate casualties. "Your platoon will be at point," Lewis continued. "Intelligence reports Panzer elements withdrawing towards Saint-Lô, possibly including Tigers." Harrison felt his stomach tighten. Tigers. The most feared German tank, with frontal armor the Sherman's gun couldn't penetrate at any practical combat range. "Sir, with respect, if we encounter Tigers in the open, we'll be slaughtered." Lewis's face hardened. "That defeatist attitude stops now, Sergeant. You've shown initiative, even courage, but this negativity undermines morale." He lowered his voice. "I've lost 17 tanks in 3 weeks. You think I don't know the odds? But those are our orders, and we will execute them." After Lewis left, sleep eluded Harrison. Near midnight, he found Colonel Montgomery smoking alone in the darkness near the field kitchen. "Bit late for a stroll, Sergeant Harrison," the colonel observed. "Just checking security, sir." Montgomery chuckled. A commander's excuse for insomnia since Caesar's time. He offered Harrison a cigarette. "What's really keeping you awake?" Harrison hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Tomorrow's operation, sir. If we hit Tigers in the open, the casualties will be severe," Montgomery finished. "Yes, I've seen the intelligence. I've also seen the orders." "How do you reconcile that, sir? Leading men into situations where many will die?" Montgomery was silent for a long moment. "In North Africa, I commanded a tank company against Rommel's panzers. We got slaughtered at Kasserine Pass. I lost friends, good men." Harrison waited, sensing there was more. "But we learned," Montgomery continued, "adapted, developed tactics that played to our strengths, and eventually we pushed them all the way back to Tunisia." He fixed Harrison with an intense stare. "The Sherman isn't perfect, but it's the tank we have. And more importantly, it has you inside it. The Germans have better machines, Harrison, but machines don't win wars alone. Men do. Men who refuse to accept defeat, who find ways to overcome superior technology with superior tactics and teamwork." Harrison considered this. "So what would you do, sir, in my position tomorrow?" "Never fight their fight," Montgomery said firmly. "Use terrain, use smoke, use mobility. Flank them if possible. If not, coordinate with artillery, with air if available. Never go head-to-head with a Tiger if you can avoid it. And trust your crew. They've come this far with you." At dawn, Harrison gathered his crew for a private briefing before the company meeting. Their faces were grim as he outlined the day's objectives and the potential threat. "Tigers?" Rodriguez echoed, fear evident in his voice. "Jesus Christ, Sarge. Their 88s will chew us up from 1,000 yards. "That's why we won't be at 1,000 yards, Harrison replied, unfolding his map. "We'll use these valleys for cover, staying hull down whenever possible." Donovan studied the map skeptically. "That route adds miles to our advance. Captain Lewis won't approve." "I'm not asking his approval," Harrison said firmly. "Once the shooting starts, communication breaks down. We'll take initiative." He met each man's eyes. "Today will be dangerous, but I believe this approach gives us the best chance." Miller spoke up. "I'm with you, Sarge. Better a court-martial than a coffin." The company briefing revealed little new information. 4 platoons would advance in echelon formation, with Harrison's platoon taking the right flank. The advance began in the gray light of dawn, a wall of Sherman tanks and infantry moving through mist-shrouded fields. For the first hour, they encountered only sporadic resistance, occasional snipers, brief mortar barrages. Then, as they approached a small rise near the village of Saint-Germain-d'Elle, everything changed. "Contact front!" came the radio call from the center platoon. "Panzer elements on the ridge." Harrison, standing in the turret with binoculars, scanned the horizon. Through the clearing mist, he spotted the unmistakable silhouette that every tanker dreaded. The angular turret of a Tiger I, its long 88mm gun sweeping the battlefield like the barrel of God's own judgment. Multiple Tigers confirmed, he reported calmly into the radio. At least 3. Range approximately 1,200 yards. Lewis's voice crackled back. All units, advance at speed. Close the range before they can sight in. Harrison froze. It was a death sentence. The Tigers could destroy every Sherman in the company before they covered half that distance. A decision crystallized in his mind. Thunderbolt actual to platoon. Disregard last. Take cover positions in Sector 4. Repeat, move to Sector 4. His 2 accompanying tanks hesitated only briefly before acknowledging, following as Harrison directed Miller to guide their Sherman into a shallow valley to the right of the main advance. "What are you doing?" Donovan demanded. "Those are direct orders. You're countermanding." "Saving our lives," Harrison replied grimly, "and hopefully theirs too." Even as he spoke, the Tigers opened fire. Through his binoculars, Harrison watched in horror as 2 Shermans erupted in flames, their turrets blown completely off by the devastating power of the German 88mm guns. Harrison made another quick decision. "Radio, patch me through to artillery support. This is Thunderbolt Actual to Firebase Bravo. Emergency fire mission. Grid coordinates Hotel 746. 3, possibly 5 Tiger tanks in the open. Danger close. Are units in vicinity?" The artillery coordinator acknowledged. "Fire mission received. ETA 3 minutes." Harrison switched frequencies. "Thunderbolt to all units in Charlie Company. Fall back to rally points. Tiger tanks on ridge have range advantage. Artillery incoming in 3 minutes. Acknowledge." Some units responded immediately. Others were already in flames. Captain Lewis's voice cut through. "Belay that order. All units continue advance." But it was too late. The surviving tanks were already reversing, seeking cover. Harrison watched as Lewis's command tank continued forward alone, perhaps trying to rally the company by example. A Tiger shell struck it directly in the turret, the catastrophic explosion leaving nothing but a burning hull. "Captain Lewis is down," Harrison reported. "All units hold position and await artillery." When the artillery finally arrived, it was with devastating effect. Dozens of 155mm shells rained down on the ridge, forcing the Tigers to withdraw. By the time the smoke cleared, the battlefield was a graveyard of burning Shermans. Harrison led Thunderbolt forward cautiously, coordinating with the other surviving tanks to secure the position and recover wounded. Of the 16 Shermans that had begun the advance, only 7 remained operational. As they worked to evacuate casualties, a major from battalion headquarters arrived by jeep, surveying the devastation with a grim expression. "Who's in command here?" he demanded. Harrison stepped forward. "Sergeant Harrison, sir, acting commander of Charlie Company since Captain Lewis was killed." The major fixed him with a cold stare. "I understand you countermanded a direct order to advance, Sergeant." "Yes, sir, the Tigers had range advantage. It would have been suicide." "That wasn't your call to make." Harrison stood his ground. "With respect, sir, it became my call when Captain Lewis was killed. The remaining tanks are operational because they followed my order to seek cover." The major seemed about to argue further when Colonel Montgomery arrived, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. "Major Phillips," Montgomery acknowledged. "I see you've met Sergeant Harrison." "Colonel," Phillips nodded stiffly. "I was just explaining to the sergeant that countermanding orders in combat is sometimes necessary when conditions on the ground change," Montgomery finished. "Sergeant Harrison's actions likely saved what remains of this company." A tense silence followed, broken when Phillips finally nodded curtly. "We'll discuss this further at headquarters. For now, consolidate your remaining forces, Sergeant. We're reorganizing for a renewed push tomorrow." After the officers departed, Harrison returned to his crew, who had witnessed the exchange from a distance. "Are you in trouble, Sarge?" Chen asked worriedly. Harrison shook his head. "Not with Colonel Montgomery in my corner. But that's not important now. We need to regroup, refuel, rearm." As the day wore on and the grim work of recovery continued, Harrison found himself beside the burnt-out shell of Captain Lewis's tank. Nothing remained of the man, only twisted metal and ash. Donovan joined him, unusually subdued. "You were right about the Tigers, about everything." "Being right doesn't bring them back," Harrison replied. Donovan nodded slowly. "No, but it kept us alive." He hesitated, then added, "The men are talking, saying you saved the company, that you should get a field promotion." Harrison snorted. "The last thing I want is more responsibility." "Maybe, but it's finding you anyway." Donovan met his gaze. For what it's worth, I'd follow you as an officer. So would the others. The unexpected vote of confidence left Harrison momentarily speechless. Finally, he managed, let's just focus on surviving tomorrow first. That night, Harrison was summoned to battalion headquarters. Colonel Montgomery waited with a captain he didn't recognize. Sergeant Harrison, Montgomery began formally, in light of today's events and the loss of Captain Lewis, I'm field promoting you to second lieutenant, effective immediately. He handed Harrison a set of gold bars. Captain Reynolds here will be taking command of Charlie Company, but you'll retain command of your platoon. Harrison stared at the insignia in his palm. Sir, I'm not sure It's already done, Montgomery interrupted. The paperwork is being processed. You've earned this, Harrison. You saved lives today. After the brief ceremony, Montgomery held Harrison back for a private word. Intelligence confirms we're facing elements of the SS Panzer Division, some of the best tank crews in the German army. Harrison absorbed this sobering information. And tomorrow we go against them again? With a difference, Montgomery replied. Air support has been guaranteed, weather permitting, and we've received our first shipment of M4A3E8s, the Easy 8 Shermans with a 76mm gun. Better against German armor, though still not a match for the Tiger's frontal armor. Are we getting them? Montgomery shook his head. Not yet. They're going to the spearhead units first. He clasped Harrison's shoulder. But you've proven you don't need the best equipment to be effective, Lieutenant. Keep doing what you're doing, fighting smart, not hard. As Harrison walked back to his unit, the weight of the gold bars in his pocket was matched by the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. His promotion would change his relationship with his crew, might create distance where there had been camaraderie. He found them gathered around a small fire, sharing cigarettes and coffee. They fell silent as he approached, perhaps sensing the change before he announced it. So, Rodriguez broke the silence. Are we calling you sir now, Lieutenant Harrison? Harrison smiled faintly. News travels fast. Congratulations, sir, Chen said earnestly. Miller nodded agreement. Well deserved. Only Donovan seemed reserved, studying Harrison with a calculating expression. What does this mean for Thunderbolt? For us? Harrison sat down among them, deliberately casual. It means I have slightly more pull when arguing for supplies. It means I can better protect you from the Phillips types who would have us charge Tigers head on. He looked each man in the eye. What it doesn't change is who we are together. This crew, this tank, that remains my priority. The tension eased visibly. Rodriguez grinned. So we still get to call you Sarge when no one's listening? I'd be disappointed if you didn't, Harrison replied. As they talked into the night, planning for tomorrow's renewed offensive, Harrison felt a sense of purpose crystallizing within him. They were outgunned, facing superior German armor, with machines ill-suited to the task. But they had something the Germans perhaps lacked, a unity forged in the crucible of battle, a trust that transcended rank and regulation. It would have to be enough. Tomorrow would tell. The rain fell steadily over the Normandy countryside, turning roads into mud and visibility to near zero. Inside the replacement tank, a refurbished M4A1 that the crew had immediately christened Thunderbolt II, Lieutenant William Harrison studied the map spread before him, a flashlight held between his teeth. Tomorrow's advance would take them through terrain that increasingly favored the defenders. Rolling hills, dense forests, and the infamous Norman hedgerows created perfect ambush territory. Can't sleep either? Miller's voice came from the driver's hatch as he climbed into the tank, seeking shelter from the rain. Harrison removed the flashlight from his mouth. Planning tomorrow's route, Captain Reynolds wants us moving at 0600. Miller settled into his seat, reaching up to help hold the map. What's the word? More Tigers? Intelligence doesn't think so. Probably Panzer IVs, maybe a Panther or two. The real problem is the terrain. Those hedgerows are perfect for ambushes. You got a plan? Harrison nodded. Working on it. The problem is, every Sherman that pokes its nose over a hedgerow is a target. We need a better way to breach them. They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of rain drumming on the tank's steel hull, creating a cocoon of isolation around them. In Detroit, Miller said finally, when we needed to pull engine blocks at the factory, we'd weld these metal teeth to the front of the forklift, let it dig in and lift. Harrison looked up sharply. Teeth? Like prongs? Yeah, big steel wedges would go right under the heaviest blocks, give us leverage. Harrison's mind raced. What if we did the same to the Thunderbolt? Welded steel prongs to the front, something to dig into those hedgerows, get under them instead of trying to go over. Miller considered this, running a mechanic's practiced eye over the imagined modification. Could work. We'd need to reinforce the attachment points to distribute the strain. But yeah, with enough momentum, it'd plow right through. First light, find whatever you need. I'll clear it with Captain Reynolds. Harrison folded the map. This could save lives tomorrow. By dawn, Miller had assembled a makeshift wedge from salvaged German tank parts, working with the company mechanics to weld it securely to the Thunderbolt II's front hull. The contraption looked ugly, but functional. 5 triangular steel wedges extending like blunt tusks from the tank's nose. Captain Reynolds inspected the modification with skeptical eyes. Looks like you're trying to turn my Sherman into a bulldozer, Lieutenant. More of a hedge clipper, sir, Harrison replied. If it works, we can modify other tanks in the company. And if it doesn't, then we'll be no worse off than trying to climb over the tops of those hedgerows in plain sight. Harrison met Reynolds' gaze. All I need is permission to try it first. Let Thunderbolt take point. Reynolds nodded slowly. Approved. But Harrison, if this works, I want it documented, could be useful across the entire front. Word of the modified Sherman spread quickly through the company. As the tanks prepared for the morning advance, other crews gathered to inspect the improvised device. Among them was Sergeant Patrick Collins, commander of another Sherman, who had transferred in as a replacement after the Tiger engagement. So this is the famous Thunderbolt, Collins remarked, a hint of condescension in his voice. And her boy commander. Harrison ignored the jab as he conducted his pre-operation inspection. Word is you disobeyed direct orders yesterday, Collins continued. Got Lewis killed, but saved yourself. That how you made Lieutenant? Donovan, who had been checking the main gun's elevation mechanism, straightened up. You got something to say, Collins. Say it straight. Collins smirked. Just making conversation. He turned back to Harrison. Let's see if your fancy plow works, Lieutenant, or if it just makes you a bigger target. As Collins walked away, Harrison caught Donovan's eye. Let it go. We've got more important things to worry about. That guy's going to be trouble, Rodriguez muttered. Maybe, Harrison agreed, but today we focus on the mission. Understood? The company moved out at X-100 as planned, advancing through fog-shrouded fields toward their objective. The village of Saint-Lô, a crucial road junction that controlled access to the interior of Normandy. Intelligence reports indicated that German forces were establishing a defensive line anchored on the town, with armored units in support. Thunderbolt II led the column, its jury-rigged plow extending before it like a medieval battering ram. As they approached the first major hedgerow, a dense wall of earth and vegetation nearly 6 feet high, Harrison ordered a halt. All stations, prepare for breach attempt. Donovan, keep your eye on that tree line. Miller, full throttle when I give the word. Harrison switched to the company frequency. All units, Thunderbolt attempting hedgerow breach. Stand by. Through the vision blocks, Harrison could see nothing beyond the massive green barrier. If German anti-tank guns or panzers waited on the other side, they'd have seconds to react. Driver, forward, maximum speed. Miller gunned the engine, sending the Sherman lurching toward the ancient barrier. The tank picked up speed, treads churning mud, the wedge-shaped prongs aimed at the base of the hedgerow. The impact was jarring, but not as violent as Harrison had feared. The steel prongs dug into the earthen base of the hedgerow, the tank's momentum driving them upward and through. Earth, roots, and vegetation exploded around them as the Sherman burst through the barrier like a steel beast emerging from the underworld. We're through, Harrison called. Gunner, scan left, Chen, right side. But the field beyond was empty of enemies. Just open farmland stretching toward the next hedgerow, 100 yards distant. It worked, Miller said, voice filled with amazement. Didn't even slow us down much. Harrison switched to the company channel. Breach successful, field clear, follow through, over. The rest of the day proceeded in similar fashion. Thunderbolt II smashed through hedgerow after hedgerow, creating passages for the tanks that followed. Word of the improvised device spread rapidly up the chain of command. By mid-afternoon, a colonel from division headquarters had arrived to observe the technique in action. Simple but effective, he remarked after watching Thunderbolt breach another hedgerow. We'll start implementing this across all armored units immediately. What do you call this device, Lieutenant? Harrison glanced at Miller, who had done the actual fabrication. Sir, the men have been calling it the rhinoceros. Rhinoceros, the colonel repeated, testing the word. I like it. Expect a commendation, Lieutenant. This could save hundreds of lives. As the colonel departed, Harrison felt a small measure of pride. Not for the coming commendation, which meant little to him, but for the lives that might be spared. Each Sherman that didn't have to expose itself by climbing over a hedgerow was a crew that might make it home. They bivouacked that night 5 miles closer to St. Lo, having covered more ground in one day than in the previous week. As the crews performed maintenance on their vehicles, Captain Reynolds called Harrison to the command post, a farmhouse that had been mostly spared by the fighting. "Division's pleased with your hedgerow cutter," Reynolds began without preamble. "They're implementing it across the entire front. Engineering units are fabricating standardized versions as we speak. Miller deserves most of the credit, sir. It was his idea." Reynolds nodded. "I'll make sure that's in the report." He unfolded a map on the farmhouse table. "But that's not why I called you here. We've got a new mission, and it's tailored for your particular approach to problem solving." Harrison studied the map. Reynolds was pointing to a small village 3 miles ahead of their current position. "Beaumont. Intelligence believes the Germans are using it as a supply hub. More importantly, they've identified what might be a Panther command tank there. One of their aces." "Might be, sir. Aerial reconnaissance is limited due to the weather, but they've intercepted radio traffic suggesting an officer named Muller is operating in the area. Apparently, he's credited with over 30 Allied tank kills in Russia and now here." Harrison felt a chill. 30 tanks meant 30 crews, perhaps 150 men. "What's the mission, sir?" "Reconnaissance in force. I want you to take your platoon, 3 Shermans, and probe their defenses. If the situation allows, eliminate their armor. If not, pull back and we'll call in artillery or air support." "When do we move out?" "Dawn tomorrow." "And Harrison," Reynolds fixed him with a hard stare, "this is a reconnaissance mission. I want information more than I want heroics. Clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." As Harrison left the command post, the weight of responsibility settled on him anew. 3 tanks, 15 men, all under his command, all depending on his judgment. He found his crew sharing a meal of K rations near the tank, the mood unusually subdued. "New orders?" Donovan asked, noting Harrison's expression. "Recon mission tomorrow, probing German defenses around Beaumont." "Just us?" "Our platoon, 3 tanks." Harrison sat on an ammunition crate. "Intelligence thinks there's a Panther command tank there, some German ace named Muller." Rodriguez whistled low. "Great, just what we need." "Actually," Harrison said, "it is what we need. Better to know where their best units are than to stumble into them by accident." Chen looked up from his meal. "Do we have a plan?" "Working on it, but it starts with getting some sleep. We move at 0500. As the others bedded down for the night, Harrison remained by the tank, studying maps and making notes by flashlight. The terrain around Beaumont favored defenders, wooded hills overlooking open approaches. A frontal assault would be suicide. "Lieutenant?" Harrison looked up to find Sergeant Collins approaching through the darkness. "Collins, what can I do for you?" Collins glanced at the map spread before Harrison. "Heard about tomorrow's mission. My tank's been assigned to your platoon." Harrison nodded. He'd seen the orders but hadn't had time to brief the additional crew. "That's right, you, me, and Thompson. We move out at 800. "Just want to be clear on one thing," Collins said, his voice low but hard. "I'll follow orders, but I'm not throwing away my crew on some glory hunt. I've seen too many good men die following bad officers." Harrison met his gaze steadily. "I have no interest in glory, Sergeant. Just in completing the mission and keeping our men alive. You follow my orders. I'll do everything in my power to bring your crew home. Fair?" After a long moment, Collins nodded. "Fair enough. See you at 0500, Lieutenant." As Collins walked away, Harrison turned back to his maps. The encounter had left him unsettled. Collins wasn't wrong to be cautious. Too many inexperienced or glory-seeking officers had sent men to needless deaths, but distrust within a platoon could be as deadly as any German gun. He would need to earn Collins' respect. And to do that, he would need a plan that accomplished the mission without needlessly risking their lives. The solution, when it came to him around midnight, was elegant in its simplicity. Not a frontal assault, not even a reconnaissance in force. Something far more subtle, something that might just work. Chapter 8, The Hunter and the Hunted. The pre-dawn darkness cloaked the 3 Sherman tanks as they moved out, engines muffled to reduce noise. Instead of taking the main road toward Beaumont, Harrison led them on a circuitous route through farms and woodlots, avoiding open ground whenever possible. "Taking the scenic route, Lieutenant?" Collins' voice crackled over the radio, a hint of impatience evident. "Avoiding the obvious approach," Harrison replied calmly. "Germans will have the main road zeroed for artillery." The truth was more calculated than that. Harrison's plan relied on coming at Beaumont from an unexpected direction, specifically from the north, where the terrain was rougher but offered better concealment. By mid-morning, they had reached a wooded ridge overlooking the village from the north. Harrison ordered the tanks to hold down positions, concealed among the trees with only their turrets exposed. All units hold position, he ordered over the radio. Thompson, maintain overwatch. Collins, stay on my left flank. I'm going forward on foot to observe. Taking his binoculars and Thompson's submachine gun, Harrison carefully made his way down the forested slope toward the village. Donovan insisted on accompanying him, a decision Harrison didn't argue with. 2 sets of eyes were better than 1. They found an observation position in a hedgerow at the forest's edge, giving them a clear view of Beaumont. The village was small, perhaps 20 stone buildings clustered around a church. Signs of German occupation were evident. 2 Kubel wagons parked near the church, a machine gun position at the main crossroads. Soldiers moving with the relaxed posture of men who believed themselves well behind the front lines. Most importantly, Harrison could see what looked like vehicle maintenance taking place in the village square. Several German tanks were being serviced, including what appeared to be a Panther with distinctive markings on its turret. "That's a command tank, all right," Donovan whispered. "See the extra radio antennas? And those markings on the turret? Kills probably, lots of them." Harrison studied the scene carefully. 5 Panzers total, 3 Panzer IVs, 1 Stu-G, and the Panther. Plus infantry, maybe a platoon's worth. Too many for a direct assault. Agreed, but they don't know we're here and they're not in defensive positions. That's valuable intelligence right there. They watched for another hour, noting troop movements, defensive emplacements, and rotation schedules. The Germans were clearly using Beaumont as a rest and refit area for their armored units. The tanks were being refueled, maintained, and resupplied, all activities that left them vulnerable. "Time to go," Harrison said finally. "We've seen enough." As they made their way back up the slope to the waiting Shermans, Harrison's mind worked through the possibilities. A direct attack, even with the element of surprise, would be costly. Artillery or air support could hit the village, but the Germans would simply move their armor elsewhere. What was needed was a way to draw out the Panther, to separate it from its support and engage it on more favorable terms. Back at the tanks, Harrison briefed the other commanders on what they'd observed. "So what's the plan, Lieutenant?" Collins asked. "Call in artillery and head home?" "Negative," Harrison replied. "Artillery would just scatter them. We need to eliminate that Panther. It's the most dangerous weapon they have in this sector." "And how do you propose we do that? 3 Shermans against a Panther and 4 other tanks? Not to mention infantry support?" "We don't fight them all at once," Harrison explained. "We set a trap. Make them come to us, a few at a time." He outlined his plan quickly. 1 Sherman would make itself briefly visible from the east, as if it were a scout from the main American force. It would fire a few rounds at the village, then withdraw rapidly. The hope was that the Germans would send a portion of their force, ideally the Panther, to investigate, thinking they were pursuing a lone, retreating tank. Meanwhile, Harrison continued, the other 2 Shermans will be waiting in ambush positions along the likely pursuit route. We'll hit them from the flanks when they pass. Thompson nodded approval. "Classic ambush. I like it." Collins looked less convinced. "And who's the bait in this trap?" "Thunderbolt will take that position," Harrison said firmly. "My crew, my risk." This seemed to mollify Collins somewhat. "And if they send more than we can handle? Then we disengage and fall back to our rally point. No heroics." After discussing the details further, they moved to implement the plan. Thompson's Sherman took up a concealed position in a small copse of trees overlooking a narrow country lane, the most direct route from the village to where Harrison would spring the trap. Collins' tank concealed itself on the opposite side of the lane, creating a crossfire zone. Both were to hold fire until Harrison gave the signal. Harrison led Thunderbolt Detard on a wide circle to approach the village from the east. They took position behind a low ridge about 1,000 yards from Beaumont. "Everyone clear on the plan?" Harrison asked his crew. Rodriguez crossed himself quickly. "Crystal clear, sir. We shoot, we scoot, we hope they chase us." "And not too many of them," Chen added nervously. Miller at the driver's station was focused on the escape route. "I've got our path mapped out. We'll have a head start, and I know exactly where the soft ground is." "Donovan?" Harrison looked to his gunner. "Ready," Donovan replied simply. "Let's go hunting." Harrison keyed the radio. "All units, Thunderbolt is in position. Operation begins in 2 minutes. Confirm readiness." Both Collins and Thompson acknowledged, their tanks ready in their ambush positions. "Driver, forward to crest of ridge. Gunner, target the fuel drums near the square. He round." Thunderbolt 2 edged forward until just the top of its turret was visible from the village. Through his binoculars, Harrison could see that the German crews were still engaged in maintenance, most of the tankers outside their vehicles. Target identified, Donovan reported. Fire. The Sherman's 75mm gun roared, the high explosive shell arcing across the distance to strike the fuel drums. The explosion was spectacular, sending a fireball into the sky and creating instant chaos in the village. German soldiers ran for cover as secondary explosions tore through their supply dump. Gunner, one more round, then we pull back. Target the Panzer IV on the left. Donovan adjusted his aim and fired again. The shell struck near the Panzer IV, not a direct hit, but close enough to shower the area with fragments. Driver, reverse. Get us behind the ridge. Miller expertly backed the Sherman down behind the protective earth, concealing them from the village once more. Now we wait, Harrison said. Let's see if they take the bait. They didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, the distinctive sound of German tank engines could be heard revving to life. Harrison risked a quick look with his periscope. Movement. 2 tanks coming our way fast, Panther in the lead, Panzer IV following. Just 2? Rodriguez asked hopefully. For now. Driver, get us moving, not too fast. We want them to follow, not lose us. Thunderbolt II began its calculated withdrawal, staying just visible enough for the pursuing German tanks to follow, but not so exposed as to present an easy target. Miller navigated expertly across the uneven terrain, maintaining distance while drawing the Germans toward the ambush site. Thompson, Collins, this is Thunderbolt, Harrison radioed. 2 tanks in pursuit, Panther and a Panzer IV. ETA to your position 3 minutes. Hold fire until my signal. The next few minutes were among the tensest of Harrison's life. Thunderbolt II crested small rises and dipped into shallow depressions, always staying just ahead of their pursuers. The Panther fired several ranging shots, all falling short or wide. They were moving too fast for accurate gunnery. As they approached the ambush site, Harrison gave his final instructions to the crew. When we reach the crossroads, we're going to make a hard right turn, then stop and defilade behind that stone wall. That will leave the Panther and Panzer exposed on the road between Thompson and Collins. Everyone ready? A chorus of affirmatives answered him. Driver, execute on my mark. Now! Miller threw the Sherman into a hard right turn at the crossroads, then immediately stopped behind a substantial stone wall that provided cover from the road. The move was so sudden that the pursuing German tanks moving at speed overshot the turn. Now they were in the kill zone. Thompson, Collins, enter! Harrison ordered over the radio. The 2 hidden Shermans opened fire simultaneously, their 75mm guns catching the German tanks in a devastating crossfire. The first rounds hit the Panzer IV, one striking its thinner side armor and penetrating. The German tank erupted in flames, its ammunition cooking off in a catastrophic explosion. The Panther, more heavily armored, absorbed the initial hits but was clearly damaged. It began to traverse its turret toward Thompson's position, its own 75mm high-velocity gun a deadly threat. It's going for Thompson, Harrison shouted. Driver, move forward. Gunner, target the Panther's rear deck. AP round. Thunderbolt II lurched forward, emerging from behind the stone wall to face the Panther, now caught between 3 American tanks. The German commander, realizing he was trapped, made a desperate attempt to escape, throwing his tank into reverse. But it was too late. Donovan's shot struck the Panther's engine compartment from behind, the shell penetrating the thinner rear armor. Black smoke poured from the German tank as its engine caught fire. Its turret continued to traverse, the crew still fighting despite their doomed position. Again, Harrison ordered. Same target. A second armor-piercing round from Thunderbolt, plus shots from both Thompson and Collins, hammered the Panther. One found its mark, igniting the German tank's ammunition. The turret blew off in a geyser of flame and smoke, landing 30 feet away in a field. In less than a minute, it was over. Both German tanks destroyed, with no casualties among the American force. Cease fire, Harrison ordered. All units report. Both Thompson and Collins reported their tanks intact, their crews unharmed. Outstanding work, Harrison said, genuine relief in his voice. But we're not done. Those explosions will bring the rest of their force, rally at Point Baker, and prepare to withdraw. As the 3 Shermans regrouped and began their fighting withdrawal, Harrison couldn't help but feel a mixture of emotions. Pride in his men and their execution of the plan. Relief at their survival, and a somber acknowledgement of the German tankers who had died. Men not so different from his own crew, fighting for their country as he fought for his. They had won this round. The Panther was eliminated, its threat removed from this sector, But the war continued, and tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. For now, though, they had survived. And in war, sometimes that was victory enough. Chapter 9. The Cost of Command. The debriefing at battalion headquarters was thorough. Harrison and the other tank commanders recounted every detail of the engagement, from the initial reconnaissance to the ambush and withdrawal. Maps were marked, timelines established, lessons noted. Colonel Montgomery himself attended, listening intently as Harrison described how they had baited and trapped the German tanks. When the formal debriefing concluded, Montgomery asked Harrison to remain behind. "Walk with me, Lieutenant," he said, leading Harrison outside the command post tent. It was late afternoon, the sky clearing after a brief shower, sunlight glinting off puddles in the churned earth. "That was good work today," Montgomery began. "Clean, efficient, minimal risk." "Thank you, sir." The tank you destroyed, that Panther, was indeed commanded by Obersturmführer Karl Muller. 15 kills on the Eastern Front, another 17 here in Normandy, a significant threat removed. Harrison nodded, unsure where the conversation was heading. "But that's not why I wanted to speak with you," Montgomery continued. "I'm more interested in how you're handling command." "Sir?" Montgomery stopped walking and faced Harrison directly. "When I was a captain in North Africa, I lost 11 tanks in a single day at Kasserine Pass. 11 tanks, 43 men. Some burned to death. Some bled out in the sand. One died in my arms asking for his mother." Harrison remained silent, sensing there was more. "After that, I became cautious. Too cautious, perhaps. Started seeing my men as resources to be preserved rather than weapons to be employed." Montgomery's gaze was penetrating. "It's a natural reaction, Harrison. The weight of sending men into danger. The guilt when they don't come back, but it can paralyze you. How did you overcome it, sir?" "I realized that my primary responsibility wasn't just to keep my men alive today. It was to win the war so they could go home tomorrow." Montgomery placed a hand on Harrison's shoulder. "You showed good judgment today. Found a way to accomplish the mission while minimizing risk. But don't let the fear of losing men keep you from using them when necessary. Sometimes the costlier action in the short term prevents greater losses in the long run." Harrison considered this. "I understand, sir. Balance the mission against the lives at stake." "Exactly, and remember, every German tank you destroy potentially saves dozens of American lives down the line." Montgomery gestured toward the command tent. "Now, I believe Captain Reynolds has a new assignment for you. Your success today has earned you some attention." Inside the tent, Reynolds was marking positions on a large wall map, a cigarette dangling from the corner of his mouth. He turned as Harrison entered. "Ah, Harrison, just the man I wanted to see." He tapped the map at a position about 5 miles from their current location. "St. Lo, division's making a major push tomorrow. Every available tank will be committed." Harrison studied the map. St. Lo was a key road junction, its capture essential to breaking out of the Normandy beachhead. "What's the mission, sir?" "Your platoon will be attached to Baker Company for the assault. You'll be supporting infantry clearing the eastern approach to the town." Reynolds traced the route with his finger. "It's going to be a tough fight. Intelligence reports multiple German strongpoints, including dug-in anti-tank guns." "What about their armor?" "Elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Division, including at least one heavy tank company. Tigers, most likely." Harrison felt his stomach tighten. They had been fortunate against the Panther. Tigers were even more formidable. "We'll need artillery support, and air if possible. Already arranged, but the weather's uncertain. Don't count on air support being there when you need it." Reynolds fixed Harrison with a serious look. "This is the big push, Lieutenant. A lot of brass watching, a lot riding on the outcome." "We'll be ready, sir." As Harrison left the command post, the weight of the coming battle settled on his shoulders. St. Lo would be unlike anything they'd faced before. Not a small engagement against isolated enemy units, but a major offensive against prepared defenses. He found his crew performing maintenance on Thunderbolt II, the mood noticeably lighter after their successful mission. Even Chen was smiling as he cleaned the bow machine gun. "Good news, Lieutenant?" Rodriguez asked, noting Harrison's approach. "New orders. We're joining the push for St. Lo tomorrow." The smiles faded as the reality of another major engagement sank in. "What's the word on German defenses?" Donovan asked, practical as always. "Heavy, anti-tank guns, infantry strong points, and Tiger tanks." Miller whistled low. "Those Tigers are no joke. 88 made me gone and will go through our armor like it's tissue paper." "Then we don't give them a clean shot," Harrison said firmly. "We use terrain, we use smoke, we use mobility, And we don't fight alone. We'll have infantry support, artillery, other tanks. As they discussed the details of tomorrow's operation, Harrison was struck by the change in his crew. Since those first days in England, they had become a cohesive unit, each man understanding his role and trusting the others to perform theirs. Even Donovan, initially skeptical of Harrison's leadership, now offered suggestions and insights without the edge of doubt that had once characterized his comments. They had been forged into something greater than the sum of their parts. A crew, a team, perhaps even a family of sorts. As darkness fell, Harrison wrote in his journal by flashlight, "Tomorrow we face our greatest challenge yet, Saint-Lô, the push to break out of Normandy once and for all. The Germans will throw everything they have at us. Tigers, 88s, their best troops." I find myself thinking not about tactics or strategy, but about my crew, about getting them through alive. Donovan with his quiet competence, Rodriguez and his fatalistic humor, Miller's steady hands, Chen's brilliant mind. Montgomery warned me today about becoming too cautious, about letting the fear of losing men paralyze me. He's right, of course. This is war. Men die. The mission must come first. But these aren't just men. They're my men, my responsibility, my friends. Tomorrow, I'll lead them into battle again. I'll make decisions that may cost lives. I'll give orders that put them in danger. And I'll do everything in my power to bring them home. He closed the journal and looked up at the stars, visible now that the clouds had cleared. The same stars visible over Ohio, over his father's shop, over the homes of his crew. Tomorrow would come soon enough with all its dangers. Tonight, they had survived. One more day in the war that seemed without end. Chapter 10, The Gates of Hell. Dawn broke hazy and cool over the Normandy countryside as the massive American armored column assembled. Dozens of Sherman tanks lined up in battle formation, their engines filling the morning air with a mechanical chorus. Infantry crouched beside half-tracks and trucks, checking weapons, smoking final cigarettes. Artillery units positioned to the rear were already ranging their guns on the first set of objectives. Thunderbolt II took its place in the formation, freshly resupplied with ammunition and fuel. Harrison stood in the turret, field glasses scanning the terrain ahead. The approach to Saint-Lô consisted of rolling farmland intersected by the ubiquitous hedgerows, gradually giving way to more built-up areas near the town itself. Captain Graham, the Baker Company commander to whom Harrison's platoon had been attached, approached on foot for a final coordination. "Harrison, good to have you with us today." Graham was a veteran of North Africa, his face weathered by sun and stress, his eyes carrying the distant look of a man who had seen too much. "Heard about your work yesterday. Clever. We could use more of that thinking." "Thank you, sir. What's our specific objective?" Graham unfolded a map on the hood of a nearby jeep. "Your platoon will advance along this axis, supporting my 2nd Infantry Platoon. Primary objective is to clear German strong points at these grid coordinates." He pointed to several marked positions. "Intelligence believes they have anti-tank guns here and here, covering the approach. Once those are neutralized, we push directly for the eastern edge of Saint-Lô." Harrison studied the map, already formulating approaches and contingencies. "What about German armor?" "Reported in the vicinity, but locations unclear." "That's where your keen eyes come in. Find them before they find us." The attack began at 0700 with a massive artillery barrage. Hundreds of shells rained down on the German positions, churning earth and stone, filling the air with smoke and dust. Under this covering fire, the American armor began to advance, Shermans moving forward in echelon formation, infantry keeping pace alongside. Thunderbolt II, its improvised hedgerow cutter still attached to the front hull, led its section forward. Harrison directed Miller to follow the draws and depressions whenever possible, keeping the tank hull down and protected. The first contact came 20 minutes into the advance. A German machine gun nest, unscathed by the artillery, opened fire on the accompanying infantry from a concealed position in a hedgerow. "Gunner, target that machine gun position, 2 o'clock, range 300 yards, Harrison ordered. "He round." "Identified," Donovan confirmed. "On the way." The Sherman's 75mm gun roared, sending a high-explosive shell directly into the hedgerow. The explosion silenced the German machine gun and sent dirt and debris skyward. American infantry immediately exploited the breach, moving forward to secure the position. For the next hour, the advance continued in this methodical fashion. Artillery fire suppressed German defenses, Tanks and infantry moved forward to exploit the openings. Positions were secured. Casualties were light, progress steady. The tactic of using the rhinoceros devices to breach hedgerows rather than climbing over them had been widely implemented, greatly reducing the vulnerability of the American tanks. Then, as they approached within a mile of St. Lo itself, the character of the battle changed dramatically. The first indication was a distant flash from a concealed position to the right of their advance. Before anyone could react, a Sherman tank in the company's right flank erupted in flames, its turret blown completely off by the tremendous force of a direct hit. "Tiger!" someone shouted over the radio. "Right flank, in the tree line!" More flashes, more explosions. Two more Shermans hit, their hulls brewing up as ammunition cooked off. Men scrambled from hatches, some on fire. Others cut down by machine gun fire as they tried to escape. "All units, take cover!" Captain Graham's voice cut through the chaos. "Artillery fire mission, grid coordinates, Hotel 9 or 3. Harrison directed Miller to move Thunderbolt 2 behind a substantial stone farmhouse, providing cover from the direction of the Tiger's fire. The other surviving tanks in the company similarly sought whatever protection they could find. "What's the situation, sir?" Donovan asked, his voice steady despite the crisis unfolding around them. Harrison assessed quickly. "Tiger tanks, unknown number, dug in on our right flank. They have the range advantage and they're shooting from concealed positions. Direct assault would be suicide." Through his binoculars, Harrison could see American infantry pinned down in ditches and behind hedgerows. The advance had stalled completely. Artillery rounds began to fall near the German positions, but the Tigers were well protected in hull-down positions. Captain Graham's voice came over the radio again. "All tank commanders, rally point at the stone barn, grid Delta 5-7. Infantry will provide covering fire." Harrison acknowledged and directed Miller to back Thunderbolt carefully toward the designated rally point, using buildings and terrain features for cover. As they approached the stone barn, Harrison could see other Shermans converging on the position, many showing damage from near misses. Inside the barn, Graham had assembled the surviving tank commanders for a hasty conference. Maps were spread on the hood of a Jeep, positions marked rapidly. "Situation is this," Graham began without preamble. "We've identified at least 3 Tiger tanks in dug-in positions covering the approach to St. Lo. They have perfect fields of fire and enough range to hit us before we can effectively return fire. Artillery isn't dislodging them." "Air support?" one of the commanders asked. "Requested, but weather at the bases is deteriorating. No guarantees." Graham surveyed the assembled officers. "Gentlemen, division expects St. Lo to be secured by nightfall. We cannot allow these Tigers to halt our advance. I need solutions." Several approaches were suggested and dismissed. A frontal assault would result in unacceptable losses. Flanking movements were constrained by terrain and the German defensive positions. Artillery had proven ineffective against the well-dug-in German tanks. Harrison studied the map intently, focusing on the terrain features between their position and the Tigers. A plan began to form in his mind. "Captain," he said finally, "what if we use smoke to cover the advance of a small force? Not a direct assault, but a team to get close enough to call precise artillery fire directly on the Tiger positions. Forward observers?" Graham considered this. "High risk, but potentially effective. Who do you have in mind?" "My tank, sir. We've got the rhinoceros attachment, which lets us breach hedgerows without exposing ourselves. We can use the smoke cover to advance through that draw." Harrison pointed to a shallow depression on the map. "It would get us within 200 yards of their position without being spotted, close enough for precise coordinates." Graham studied the proposed route, his expression revealing the calculation of risk versus reward. "It's still damn dangerous, Harrison. If they spot you before you're in position, you're sitting ducks." "Yes, sir, but I believe it's our best option." After a moment's further consideration, Graham nodded. "Approved. I'll coordinate with artillery. They'll need to lay down a perfect smoke screen and be ready to shift to high explosive on your coordinates." "One other thing, sir," Harrison added. "I'd like Sergeant Collins's tank to accompany us. 2 tanks increase our chances of success, and Collins has a good crew." Graham raised an eyebrow. "Collins? I thought you two weren't exactly friendly." "We're not, sir, but he's a good tank commander, and that's what matters right now." To Harrison's surprise, Collins agreed without argument when approached with the plan. "Beats sitting here waiting to get picked off," he said simply. "Just don't get us killed, Lieutenant." The operation was set in motion within minutes. American artillery began laying down a dense smoke screen along the area where the Tigers were positioned, obscuring their view of the battlefield. Under this cover, Thunderbolt II and Collins's Sherman, designated Avenger, began their careful advance down the shallow draw Harrison had identified. Inside Thunderbolt, the crew was tense but focused. Miller guided the tank with surgical precision, keeping to the lowest ground, using every fold in the earth for cover. Donovan kept the main gun trained on the area where the Tigers were believed to be positioned, ready to fire if they were spotted. Rodriguez had loaded an armor-piercing round, though all of them knew it would likely do little against the Tiger's frontal armor. Chen manned the bow machine gun, scanning for German infantry who might expose their approach. "Distance to target?" Harrison asked as they proceeded carefully through the smoke-filled landscape. 500 yards, Chen reported, consulting the map. "We should be approaching the first hedgerow soon." "Driver, prepare to engage Rhinoceros. Everyone brace for impact." The Sherman lurched forward as Miller increased power, driving the steel prongs of the Rhinoceros attachment into the base of the hedgerow. Earth and vegetation exploded around them as they burst through the ancient barrier. "We're through," Miller reported, continuing advance. Behind them, Collins's tank followed in their path, maintaining position about 50 yards back. The smoke was beginning to thin as they approached the German positions, making them increasingly vulnerable to detection. 300 yards, Chen updated. "Smokescreen is dissipating. We'll be visible soon." Harrison made a quick decision. "Driver, increase speed. Get us to that copse of trees at 2 o'clock. We'll use it for concealment for final observations." Thunderbolt II surged forward, covering the open ground as quickly as the Sherman's engine would allow. They reached the small cluster of trees just as the smoke began to clear significantly. "Hold position," Harrison ordered. "Gunner, use your sight to locate the Tiger positions." Through the telescopic sight of the main gun, Donovan carefully scanned the terrain ahead. "Got them. 3 Tigers. Hold down behind that stone wall at 11 o'clock. Range approximately 250 yards. Harrison keyed his radio. "Firebase Baker, this is Thunderbolt. Have eyes on target. 3 Tigers at grid coordinates, Kilo 7903. Request immediate fire mission, high explosive, danger close." "Thunderbolt Firebase Baker, fire mission confirmed. Rounds incoming in 30 seconds. Take cover." "Driver, reverse into defilade behind that earthen bank," Harrison ordered. "All units incoming artillery. Secure hatches." The Sherman backed hastily into a protected position just as the first artillery shells began to fall near the Tiger positions. The impacts were thunderous, sending dirt, stone, and shrapnel flying in all directions. Shell after shell pounded the area, guided by Harrison's precise coordinates. After 2 minutes of concentrated fire, the barrage lifted. Harrison cautiously raised his head through the turret hatch to observe the results. The German position had been devastated. 1 Tiger was clearly destroyed, its turret askew, flames licking from the engine compartment. Another appeared immobilized, its tracks shattered by a direct hit. The third was backing away, apparently trying to find a new firing position. "Gunner, target the retreating Tiger," Harrison ordered. "Aim for the tracks." "Identified," Donovan confirmed. "On the way." The Sherman's 75mm gun roared, the shell streaking toward the withdrawing German tank. It struck just behind the drive sprocket, not penetrating but damaging the track assembly. The Tiger ground to a halt, now immobilized but still dangerous. "Firebase Baker, Thunderbolt. 2 Tigers destroyed, 1 immobilized but operational. Request additional fire mission on same coordinates." "Negative, Thunderbolt. Conserving ammunition for primary assault. Can you engage the remaining target?" Harrison assessed the situation quickly. The immobilized Tiger was still capable of firing, its deadly 88mm gun a threat to any Sherman within its range. But with its mobility compromised, they might be able to maneuver to a position where they could engage its thinner side or rear armor. "Collins, this is Harrison. Are you seeing this?" "Affirmative," came the reply. 1 Tiger still in play. What's the plan?" "We flank it. Your tank moves right, mine moves left. We coordinate fire on its side armor. Timing has to be perfect. We both emerge, fire, and duck back before it can traverse its turret." "Roger that on your signal." Harrison briefed his crew quickly on the plan. It was high risk, but with the other Tigers eliminated and the remaining 1 immobilized, it was their best opportunity to clear the way for the American advance. "Driver, move left, keeping this tree line between us and the Tiger. When I give the word, break cover, advance 30 yards, stop, and allow Donovan to fire. Then immediate reverse back to cover." "Understood." Pursuit bomb. Got it, Miller confirmed. Ready when you are. Harrison keyed his radio. Collins, we go on my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute. Thunderbolt 2 surged forward from the tree line, angling to bring its gun to bear on the Tiger's exposed flank. Simultaneously, Collins's tank emerged from cover to the right. The German tank commander, suddenly aware of the threat from two directions, began traversing his turret toward Collins's more exposed position. Gunner, fire, Harrison ordered. On the way! Thunderbolt's 75mm gun roared, sending an armor-piercing round streaking toward the Tiger's side armor. Almost simultaneously, Collins' tank fired as well. Both shells struck the German tank, one penetrating the thinner side armor, the other striking near the turret ring. The Tiger wasn't destroyed, but smoke began pouring from its engine compartment, and its turret stopped traversing. Driver, reverse! Miller threw the Sherman into reverse, narrowly avoiding a return shot from the Tiger that kicked up dirt just feet in front of their position. Collins' tank had also retreated to cover. I think we hit something vital, Donovan reported, still watching through his sight. They're bailing out. Sure enough, Harrison could see the Tiger's crew abandoning the stricken tank, fleeing toward nearby buildings as small arms fire from American infantry began to target them. Captain Graham, this is Harrison. Tiger threat neutralized. 2 destroyed, 1 abandoned by crew. Route to objective now clear. There was a moment of silence before Graham's voice came back, a note of disbelief evident. Confirmed, Harrison. Outstanding work. All units resume advance to primary objective. As the American armor began to move forward once more, Harrison exchanged a glance with Collins, whose tank had pulled alongside Thunderbolt. The sergeant gave a respectful nod, acknowledgement of a plan well executed and a risk that had paid off. The push towards St. Lo continued, but now with renewed momentum and confidence. The Tiger obstacle that had threatened to stall the entire offensive had been overcome through a combination of tactical thinking, courage, and coordination. As Thunderbolt II rejoined the main advance, Harrison felt a complex mixture of emotions, pride in his crew and their accomplishment, relief at their survival, and a somber acknowledgement of the cost. Several Shermans had been destroyed before their intervention, their crews killed or wounded. Such was the cruel arithmetic of war. Lives weighed against objectives, risks balanced against necessities. The calculations a commander had to make, knowing that each decision might send men to their deaths. They had won this round, but the war continued and the gates of St. Lo still loomed ahead, promising even fiercer resistance before the day was done. Chapter 11, Brothers in Arms. The approach to St. Lo had been hard-fought, but the battle for the town itself was a special kind of hell. Street by street, building by building, the American forces pushed forward against fanatical German resistance. Snipers in the upper floors of buildings, machine gun nests at strategic intersections, mines and booby traps in the rubble-strewn streets. For the tank crews, it was a particularly dangerous environment. The narrow streets limited maneuverability, while the multi-story buildings provided perfect vantage points for German Panzerfaust teams, infantry with shoulder-fired anti-tank weapons that could penetrate a Sherman's armor at close range. Thunderbolt II advanced cautiously down a street lined with damaged buildings, part of a combined arms team with infantry screening for threats. Harrison stood in the turret, scanning the upper floors of buildings ahead, painfully aware of his exposure but unwilling to sacrifice visibility. Movement, second floor. Building with the blue shutters, Chen reported from the bow gunner position. Harrison spotted it too, a flash of movement behind a broken window. Gunner, he round, building with blue shutters, second floor window. Identified, Donovan confirmed. On the way. The 75mm high explosive round struck just above the window, the explosion collapsing part of the facade. A German soldier tumbled from the opening, while others could be seen fleeing deeper into the building. Infantry, clear that building, Harrison called to the squad leader moving alongside the tank. American infantry rushed forward, covering each other as they entered the structure to clear it room by room. Thunderbolt continued its advance, providing mobile fire support as needed. The radio crackled with constant traffic, reports of resistance, calls for support, status updates. The battle for St. Lo was unfolding across the entire perimeter of the town, with multiple American units converging from different directions. As they approached a small square, dominated by a damaged church, the distinctive crack of an anti-tank gun split the air. The shell passed just over Thunderbolt's turret, close enough that Harrison felt the pressure wave. Anti-tank gun, front, he shouted, Driver, reverse into that alley. Miller skillfully backed the Sherman into a narrow side street, providing cover from the direct fire of the anti-tank gun. The German crew, seeing their target disappear, shifted their aim to the American infantry still in the open, sending another shell screaming down the street. Infantry taking casualties, Harrison reported over the radio. Anti-tank gun in position near the church. Request support. Thunderbolt, this is Avenger, Collins' voice responded. We're one street over to your east. Can provide flanking fire if you can keep their attention. Harrison quickly assessed the situation. A coordinated attack from two directions might neutralize the threat, but it would put both tanks at risk. Confirmed, Avenger. On my signal, we'll move forward and draw their fire. You hit them from the flank. He briefed his crew on the plan. We're going to expose ourselves just enough to draw their attention. Donovan, be ready to return fire instantly if you get a clear shot. Miller, be prepared for immediate evasion if they target us. After ensuring everyone understood their roles, Harrison keyed his radio. Avenger, we move on my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute. Thunderbolt 2 surged forward from the alley, just far enough to bring its gun to bear on the church square. As expected, the German anti-tank crew immediately swung their weapon toward the Sherman. Identified, Donovan called. Anti-tank gun behind sandbags at base of church steps. Fire! The Sherman's gun roared just as the German weapon fired as well. The enemy shell screamed past Thunderbolt's turret, missing by inches. Donovan's round struck near the anti-tank position. Not a direct hit, but close enough to shower the German crew with debris. At that moment, Collins's tank emerged from a side street, catching the German position in a crossfire. His first shot was dead on target, destroying the anti-tank gun and its crew in a single devastating blast. Target destroyed, Collins reported. Area clear. Good shooting, Avenger, Harrison acknowledged. Let's keep moving. The two Shermans advanced together into the square, infantry moving alongside. The church itself needed to be cleared, as did several surrounding buildings that might harbor German troops. As the infantry prepared to enter the church, a new threat emerged. From a narrow alley to the right of the square, a German half-track mounted with a 20mm anti-aircraft gun appeared, its rapid-fire cannon immediately opening up on the exposed American infantry. Flak Panzer, Harrison shouted. Gunner, traverse right. Both Thunderbolt and Collins's tank began to swing their turrets toward the new threat. But the German vehicle was firing from a position that offered protection from direct tank fire. Several infantrymen fell under the withering 20mm fire before they could reach cover. Harrison made a split-second decision. Driver, advance. We need a clear shot. Thunderbolt lurched forward, moving to a position where its main gun could bear on the German half-track. This exposed the Sherman to fire from other potential threats in the area, but Harrison saw no alternative if they were to save the pinned-down infantry. As they maneuvered for a shot, the distinctive hollow thump of a Panzerfaust firing came from somewhere to their left. The shape-charged warhead struck Thunderbolt's left side, the explosion rocking the tank violently. Status! Harrison demanded, ears ringing from the blast. Hull hit, Miller reported. Left side above the track. No penetration, but track might be damaged. Before Harrison could respond, machine gun fire raked the turret, forcing him to drop down into the protected interior. They were caught in a crossfire, the Flak Panzer to their right, infantry with anti-tank weapons to their left. Collins, we're hit, Harrison radioed. Can you engage the Flak Panzer? Negative, no clear shot from my position. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. American infantry casualties were mounting under the Flak Panzer's fire, and more Panzerfaust teams were likely moving to positions where they could engage the vulnerable Shermans. Harrison assessed their options quickly. They couldn't retreat without abandoning the infantry. They couldn't stay in place and become targets. They had to neutralize the immediate threats and regain momentum. Driver, forward at full speed, he ordered. We're going to ram the Flak Panzer. Ram it? Miller questioned, but his hands were already moving to comply. It's in a position where we can't get a gun angle. Our only option is to hit it directly. Thunderbolt surged forward, its engine roaring as Miller pushed it to maximum acceleration. The Sherman's weight and momentum would be devastating against the lightly armored half-track. The German crew, seeing the tank bearing down on them, attempted to maneuver their vehicle out of the way, but the narrow alley left little room for evasion. Thunderbolt slammed into the Flak Panzer at nearly 20 miles per hour, crushing its front end and sending the 20mm gun cartwheeling over the top of the half-track. Reverse, Harrison commanded. Get us clear. Miller threw the transmission into reverse, backing the Sherman away from the wrecked German vehicle. As they did, Collins' tank moved to cover their exposed flank, its main gun and coaxial machine guns sweeping the buildings where the Panzerfaust fire had originated. The square was secured within minutes, the combination of tank fire and infantry clearing operations eliminating the remaining German resistance. But the cost had been high. Several infantrymen killed or wounded, and Thunderbolt had sustained damage that, while not catastrophic, would need assessment. As the infantry secured the area and established defensive positions, Harrison ordered a temporary halt to inspect their tank. The Panzerfaust hit had damaged the left track assembly and blown off a section of side skirt armor, but the hull itself had held. More concerning was damage to the drive sprocket, which could potentially immobilize them if it failed completely. "Can we repair it?" Harrison asked Miller, who was examining the damaged components with a mechanic's practiced eye. "Field repair, yes. Enough to keep us moving, but we'll need proper maintenance back at the motor pool." Miller looked up at Harrison. "We can keep fighting, sir. Just need about 20 minutes to fix the worst of it." Harrison nodded and radioed the situation to Captain Graham. They were granted the time for emergency repairs with Collins's tank and an infantry squad providing security. As Miller worked on the damaged track, assisted by Rodriguez and Chen, Harrison conferred with Collins, who had approached on foot. "Nice driving back there," Collins said, genuine respect in his voice. "Ballsy move." "Didn't see many alternatives," Harrison replied. "Thanks for covering us." Collins nodded. "That's what we do, isn't it? Cover each other." He hesitated, then added, "Look, I owe you an apology. When you first took command, I thought you were another Green Lieutenant who'd get men killed. I was wrong." Harrison was surprised by the admission. "No apology needed. Skepticism keeps us alive out here." "Maybe, but there's a difference between healthy skepticism and being an ass." Collins extended his hand. "Anyway, I'd follow you into hell now. After today, I think most of the men would." Harrison accepted the handshake, recognizing it as more than just a gesture. It was an acknowledgement, soldier to soldier, of mutual respect earned under fire. Their conversation was interrupted by Miller's call from beneath the tank. "Repairs completed, sir. We're good to go." Harrison returned to Thunderbolt, climbing back into the turret as the crew resumed their positions. The advance would continue, pushing deeper into St. Lo as part of the larger American offensive. But something had changed, not just in the relationship between Harrison and Collins, but in the way the entire platoon functioned. They had faced some of the toughest fighting of the campaign and emerged not just intact, but stronger, more cohesive, more trusting. Brothers in arms, forged in the crucible of combat. As Thunderbolt 2 rumbled forward once more, Harrison reflected that perhaps this was the true strength of the American forces. Not superior equipment or overwhelming numbers, though those certainly helped, but the bonds between men who fought together, who bled together, who would die for each other if necessary. It was a strength the Germans, for all their technical superiority and tactical skill, might never truly understand. The eastern approach to St. Lo had become a killing ground. German 88mm anti-tank guns, cleverly concealed in the rubble, had clear fields of fire down the main avenues. Snipers occupied the upper floors of bombed-out buildings. Machine gun nests covered every intersection. And somewhere in the maze of narrow streets, intelligence reported at least one more Tiger tank. Lieutenant William Harrison studied the tactical map spread across the hood of his Sherman. Captain Graham had ordered Thunderbolt 2 and Collins's tank to probe the northeastern sector, looking for a route that might bypass the heaviest German defenses. "I don't like it," Donovan said quietly, standing at Harrison's shoulder. "Urban combat is a death trap for tanks. Too many blind spots, too many places for Panzerfaust teams to hide." "We don't have much choice," Harrison replied. "St. Lo has to fall. It's the key to breaking out of the beachhead." Miller joined them, wiping grease from his hands. "Track repair's done, but the right bogey wheel is still making noise. Won't fail immediately, but it needs proper maintenance." Harrison nodded. "We'll make do." He folded the map. "Mount up, we move in 5 minutes." As the crew took their positions, Harrison noticed Collins approaching. The sergeant's face was grim, the strain of constant combat evident in the dark circles under his eyes. "Just got word," Collins said in a low voice. "Thompson's tank got hit 10 minutes ago. Panzerfaust from a second-story window, 3 dead, 2 wounded." Harrison felt the news like a physical blow. Thompson had been with the company since England, an experienced and level-headed commander. "Who made it?" he asked. "Gunner and loader. Both burned pretty bad." Collins looked toward the town, his expression hardening. Those bastards are dug in tight. This is going to be ugly. Stay alert. Stick to the plan. We go building by building, covering each other. Harrison extended his hand. Good hunting, Sergeant. Collins gripped his hand firmly. You too, Lieutenant. The two Shermans advanced cautiously into the outskirts of St. Lo, maintaining a distance of about 50 yards between them for mutual support. American infantry squads moved alongside, using the tanks for cover while clearing buildings. The first contact came almost immediately, a machine gun opening fire from a partially collapsed bakery. The muzzle flashes were visible from an upper window. Gunner He-round, building at 2 o'clock, second floor, Harrison ordered. Identified, Donovan confirmed. On the way. The 75mm shell struck just below the window, the explosion collapsing a large section of the facade. The machine gun fell silent. Infantry, clear that building, Harrison called to the squad leader moving alongside them. Two squads of American soldiers rushed forward, covering each other as they entered the structure. Within minutes, they emerged, signaling all clear. The pattern repeated itself block by block. German resistance was fanatical but increasingly disorganized. The sustained American pressure had disrupted their command and control, forcing them to fight as isolated pockets rather than a coordinated defense. By mid-afternoon, Thunderbolt II and Collins's tank had advanced nearly 8 blocks into the town, deeper than any other American units. They were approaching a small square dominated by a damaged church when Harrison spotted movement in his periscope. Contact, large vehicle moving behind the church, he reported. Driver, halt. All stations, stand by. Through his binoculars, Harrison caught glimpses of what appeared to be a tank maneuvering into position behind the church. The profile was unmistakable. Tiger, he said quietly. Collins, confirmed Tiger tank at the church square. Hold position. Roger that, came the tense reply. Orders? Harrison considered their options. A frontal engagement with the Tiger was suicidal. The German tank's 88mm gun would pierce the Sherman's armor easily at this range, but they couldn't retreat without exposing the infantry to devastating fire. We need to flank it, Harrison decided. There's an alley to the left that might give us a side shot. Infantry will provide diversionary fire from the front while we maneuver. He briefed the infantry lieutenant quickly, then gave instructions to his crew. Miller, take us down that alley, slow and quiet. Chen, watch the upper windows for Panzerfaust teams. Rodriguez, load armor piercing. Donovan, be ready for a quick shot. We'll have seconds at most. Thunderbolt II backed carefully into a side street, then began its cautious advance through the narrow alley. The buildings pressed close on either side, barely leaving clearance for the tank. Any German infantry hiding in the structures above could easily drop grenades onto the Sherman's vulnerable top armor. Harrison remained standing in the turret, scanning the upper windows despite the risk. Better to spot a threat early than be buttoned up and blind. They were halfway down the alley when the sound of intense small arms fire erupted from the direction of the square, the infantry launching their diversion. Almost simultaneously, the deep boom of the Tiger's main gun responded, its shell impacting somewhere out of sight with a tremendous explosion. Driver, increase speed, Harrison ordered. We need to get in position before they relocate. Miller pushed the Sherman as fast as he dared through the confined space. As they approached the end of the alley, Harrison could see it open onto the square about 30 yards to the left of the church. If the Tiger remained in its current position, they would emerge with a clear shot at its thinner side armor. Prepare to engage, he ordered. Gunner, target will be at approximately 9 o'clock as we exit the alley, range under 100 yards. Driver stopped just long enough for Donovan to fire, then immediate reverse. Ready, Donovan confirmed, his voice steady. The Sherman eased forward to the mouth of the alley. Through his periscope, Harrison could now see the Tiger clearly. It was facing away from them, its attention focused on the American infantry firing from buildings across the square. Its side was fully exposed. Driver, halt! Gunner, fire when ready! On the way! The Sherman's 75mm gun roared, the shell streaking across the short distance to slam into the Tiger's side armor just below the turret ring. At this close range, even the Sherman's standard armor-piercing round could penetrate. The effect was devastating. The shell punched through the German tank's armor and detonated inside. A bright flash erupted from the Tiger's open commander's hatch, followed by billowing black smoke. Secondary explosions began to rock the massive vehicle as its ammunition cooked off. Target hit, Harrison reported. Driver, reverse, get us clear. Miller threw the Sherman into reverse, backing rapidly down the alley as the Tiger continued to burn. They had just reached the relative safety of the side street when a massive explosion tore through the square as the German tank's main ammunition supply detonated. The Tiger's turret was lifted completely off the hull, landing several yards away. "Scratch one, Tiger," Rodriguez said with grim satisfaction. "Collins, target destroyed," Harrison radioed. "Rally at checkpoint Delta." As the two Shermans regrouped, American infantry began pushing forward to secure the church square. The elimination of the Tiger had broken the back of German resistance in this sector. Within the hour, they had advanced another 6 blocks, encountering only sporadic resistance from isolated infantry. By nightfall, St. Lo was largely in American hands. Pockets of German troops continued to fight, but their organized defense had collapsed. The crucial road junction that had been the objective of weeks of bloody fighting was finally secured. In the gathering darkness, Harrison found a moment of quiet to reflect on the day's events. They had accomplished their mission. The road to the interior of France now lay open, but the cost had been terrible. Of the 16 Sherman tanks that had begun the assault that morning, only 7 remained operational. Dozens of American soldiers lay dead or wounded, and the war continued. Tomorrow would bring new objectives, new battles, new losses. He thought of Thompson and his crew, of the Tiger's crew, burned alive in their steel coffin, of all the men on both sides who would never see home again. Harrison had entered this war believing in its necessity, in the justice of the Allied cause. Nothing had changed that belief, but as he watched the flames of burning St. Lo illuminate the night sky, he found himself hoping with all his heart that each victory brought them one step closer to the war's end, one step closer to home. Chapter 11, The Road to Paris. The breakthrough at St. Lo transformed the war in France. With the German defensive line broken, American armor poured through the gap, advancing rapidly across the French countryside. Operation Cobra, as the offensive was known, had succeeded beyond the most optimistic projections. For the men of Thunderbolt II, the following weeks were a blur of constant movement, occasional sharp engagements, and increasingly enthusiastic welcomes from liberated French civilians. The static warfare of the hedgerow country gave way to a war of movement and maneuver, playing to the strengths of American armor doctrine. Harrison's platoon, now expanded to 5 tanks with fresh replacements, spearheaded the advance of their battalion. Their mission was to probe ahead of the main force, identify enemy strong points, and exploit gaps in the German defenses. It was exhilarating work after the grinding attritional battles of June and July. The Sherman's mobility and mechanical reliability came to the fore as they covered 30, sometimes 40 miles a day. German resistance was sporadic. A hastily established roadblock here, a brief engagement with retreating armor there, but nothing like the coordinated defense they had faced earlier. "They're breaking," Colonel Montgomery told Harrison during a briefing in early August. "The German army in France is on the verge of collapse. Paris could fall within the month." The mention of Paris sent a ripple of excitement through the headquarters tent. The liberation of the French capital would be both a strategic victory and a powerful symbol of the turning tide. "What's our role, sir?" Harrison asked. Montgomery spread a map on the table. "Your platoon will join a task force pushing toward Chartres." He pointed to a city about 60 miles southwest of Paris. "It's a key road junction. Take it, and we cut off the German forces trying to retreat from western France." The operation began the following morning. Harrison's platoon joined a battle group consisting of 10 Sherman tanks, a company of infantry and half-tracks, and a battery of self-propelled artillery. Their advance was rapid, meeting minimal resistance as they pushed through the rolling farmland. By mid-afternoon, they had covered nearly 30 miles. The spires of Chartres Cathedral were visible in the distance when they encountered their first serious opposition. German anti-tank guns, well concealed in a tree line, opened fire on the lead elements of the American column. 2 Shermans were hit in the initial volley, one brewing up immediately as its ammunition exploded. The other was immobilized, its tracks shattered, but the crew managed to bail out. Harrison, commanding the 3rd tank in line, reacted instantly. "Driver, left oblique, seek cover behind that farmhouse. Gunner, locate the anti-tank positions." Thunderbolt II swerved off the road, using a substantial stone farmhouse for cover. The other tanks in the column similarly dispersed, seeking whatever protection they could find. Through his binoculars, Harrison could see muzzle flashes from at least 3 positions along the tree line, about 800 yards ahead. The German guns appeared to be towed 75mm anti-tank guns, formidable weapons capable of penetrating a Sherman's armor at this range. "Captain Reynolds Harrison," he radioed to the task force commander. Identified 3 anti-tank guns in the tree line at grid point Baker 7. Request artillery support. Negative on artillery, came the reply. They're repositioning. Can your platoon flank the position from the east while the main force provides covering fire? Harrison studied the terrain. A shallow draw ran parallel to the road about 200 yards to their right, offering concealed approach to within 400 yards of the German position. Affirmative, we can attempt a flanking maneuver. 5 minutes to get into position. He quickly briefed his platoon over the radio, assigning positions and fields of fire. They would advance via the draw, then emerge simultaneously to hit the German guns from the flank. All tanks prepare to move on my signal, Harrison ordered. Main force will provide suppressing fire. We advance to firing positions, engage the anti-tank guns, then support the infantry assault. Questions? There were none. His commanders, including Collins, now a seasoned veteran despite his initial skepticism, understood the plan. Execute, Harrison commanded. Thunderbolt II led the way, darting from behind the farmhouse to the relative cover of the draw. The other 4 tanks of the platoon followed at intervals, maintaining separation to minimize losses if they were spotted. As they moved, the main American force opened fire on the German positions. Sherman tanks fired their 75mm guns, machine guns chattered, and mortar rounds began falling near the tree line. The suppressing fire wasn't particularly accurate at this range, but it forced the German gun crews to stay under cover, reducing their effectiveness. Harrison's platoon reached their firing positions without being detected. The 5 Shermans spread out along a low ridge, giving each tank a clear field of fire toward the German guns. All tanks, identify targets, Harrison ordered. Fire on my command. Through his binoculars, he could now clearly see the 3 anti-tank guns. PaK-40s, the standard German 75mm anti-tank gun. Each was protected by a gun shield and surrounded by sandbag positions for the crew. About 24 infantry provided local security. All tanks fire! 5 Sherman guns roared as one, sending high explosive shells screaming toward the German position. The effect was devastating. One gun took a direct hit, its gun shield and barrel thrown into the air by the explosion. Another was clearly damaged, its wheels shattered and crew scattered. Again, Harrison ordered. Same targets. A second volley slammed into the German positions. The 3rd anti-tank gun was hit directly, flipping onto its side from the force of the explosion. German infantry could be seen fleeing from the tree line, their position now untenable under the flanking fire. Captain Reynolds, anti-tank positions neutralized, Harrison reported, advancing to secure. The 5 Shermans moved forward, covering the ground quickly to prevent any German attempt to reman the guns. American infantry from the main force joined them, sweeping through the position to clear any remaining resistance. As Harrison surveyed the captured position from his turret, he felt a complex mixture of emotions. Satisfaction at a well-executed operation, relief at their success with minimal casualties, and a somber acknowledgement of the German dead scattered among the wrecked guns. They had prevailed this time, but the war ground on, each engagement exacting its toll in lives and suffering. The task force secured Chartres the following day, meeting only token resistance. The German forces in the area were indeed retreating, focusing more on escape than organized defense. By August 15th, American advance elements were within 20 miles of Paris itself. For the crew of Thunderbolt II, the race toward the French capital was a welcome change from the bloody slog of Normandy. The terrain was favorable for armored operations, open country with good roads and minimal natural obstacles. More importantly, they were winning, advancing every day, liberating town after town from 4 years of German occupation. The reception from French civilians was often emotional. As they passed through villages, people lined the streets, cheering, throwing flowers, offering wine and food. Children ran alongside the tanks, waving small American flags that seemed to appear as if by magic after years of being hidden from German eyes. Never thought I'd be a liberating hero, Rodriguez remarked one evening as they performed maintenance on the tank. Back home, people crossed the street when they saw me coming. War changes everything, Donovan replied, cleaning the breech of the main gun with methodical care. The real question is what happens after. After the war, you mean? Chen looked up from the radio he was repairing. Yeah, when we go home. If we go home. The moment of somber reflection was interrupted by Captain Reynolds, approaching with a map in hand. Harrison, got new orders for your platoon, he said without preamble. Division wants a reconnaissance in force along this axis. He traced a line on the map that led northwest toward the Seine River. Intelligence reports German armor withdrawing across the Seine at Mantes-la-Jolie. Your job is to confirm and harass if possible, but don't get decisively engaged. The main force is still a day behind you. Harrison studied the route. It would take them about 15 miles from the main American advance, close enough for support if needed, but far enough to be isolated if they encountered serious resistance. "When do we move out?" he asked. "Dawn tomorrow. Resupply convoy will be here in an hour with fuel and ammunition." The platoon departed as ordered at first light, advancing rapidly along secondary roads. The countryside here was largely untouched by war, peaceful farms and vineyards basking in the August sun. It was hard to believe that a world war raged around them. They covered the first 10 miles without incident, encountering neither German forces nor French civilians. The roads were eerily empty, creating a sense of unease among the tankers. The absence of opposition could mean either that the Germans had truly withdrawn or that they were being drawn into a trap. Harrison maintained a cautious pace, keeping the tanks dispersed and rotating the lead position every few miles to prevent crew fatigue. By mid-morning, they had reached a ridge overlooking the Seine Valley. Through his binoculars, Harrison could see the river winding below, and beyond it, the outskirts of Mantes-la-Jolie. What caught his attention immediately was the activity at the town's bridge. German vehicles were indeed crossing, trucks, half-tracks, and what appeared to be the distinctive profiles of Panzer IV tanks. "Contact," Harrison reported over the radio. "German armored column retreating across the bridge at Mantum. I count at least 6 Panzer IVs and numerous support vehicles." "Understood," Reynolds replied from the main force. "Maintain observation and report any changes. Artillery is being positioned to range the bridge, but they're still about an hour out." Harrison considered their options. They were too far to engage effectively, but close enough to maintain observation. And yet something about the scene below troubled him. The German withdrawal appeared too orderly, too unhurried for an army in retreat. And there was no sign of demolition preparations on the bridge, which would be standard procedure for a withdrawing force. "I don't like it," he said to Donovan, who was observing through the gunner's sight. "This feels wrong." "Like they want us to see them," Donovan agreed. "Could be bait." Harrison made a decision. "All tanks, pull back 200 yards into defilade. Maintain minimum radio traffic. Something's not right." The 5 Shermans reversed carefully from their observation positions, taking cover behind the ridge where they could observe without being easily spotted. They didn't have long to wait. Within 20 minutes, the distinctive sound of aircraft engines could be heard approaching from the east. "Aircraft!" Chen called from his position. "Multiple contacts." Harrison scanned the sky, quickly spotting the incoming planes. Focke-Wulf 190s, the Luftwaffe's premier fighter bomber. There were at least a dozen, flying low and fast. "All tanks, take cover in those woods," Harrison ordered, pointing to a copse of trees about 100 yards to their right. "Move now!" The Shermans accelerated toward the tree line as the German aircraft drew closer. They had just reached the relative concealment of the woods when the first bombs began to fall, impacting along the ridge where they had been positioned minutes earlier. "They were waiting for us," Collins radioed, his voice tight. "This whole thing was a setup." Harrison watched as the German planes made a second pass, bombs cratering the empty ridge. Had they remained in their observation posts, they would have been devastated by the air attack. "Stay under cover," he ordered. "Those fighters can't see us clearly in these woods, but they know we're in the area." For the next 30 minutes, the German aircraft circled and strafed, searching for the American tanks. The thick summer foliage provided effective concealment, and eventually the planes departed, presumably low on fuel. As the sound of aircraft faded, Harrison keyed his radio. "Captain Reynolds, be advised, we encountered enemy air activity. Appears to be a coordinated ambush. German column at the bridge was likely bait." "Understood," Reynolds replied. "Fall back to Rally Point Charlie. We've got reports of significant German armor moving in your area." Harrison acknowledged the order, but before they could move, Collins' voice came urgently over the radio. "Contact! German armor approaching from the north. Approximately 1 kilometer, moving fast." Through a gap in the trees, Harrison could now see them. The unmistakable silhouettes of Panther tanks, at least 5 of them, advancing across an open field toward their position. The German force had been waiting, probably alerted by the aircraft, and was now moving to encircle them. "All tanks, prepare to withdraw to the south," Harrison ordered. "We're outnumbered and outgunned. Disengage and fall back by bounds, covering each other's movement." The withdrawal began immediately, the Shermans breaking cover one at a time while the others provided overwatch. They had covered about half a mile, using every fold in the terrain for concealment, when disaster struck. The lead Panther crested a rise directly in front of them, its 75-millimeter gun trained on the retreating American tanks. It fired immediately, the shell striking one of Harrison's platoon tanks squarely in the turret. The Sherman erupted in flames, its ammunition cooking off in a catastrophic explosion. "Ambush!" Harrison shouted. "Reverse! Find cover!" But they were caught in the open, with minimal cover available. A second Panther appeared to their left, then a third to the right. They were being surrounded. "We have to break through," Harrison decided instantly. "All tanks, concentrate fire on the lead Panther, then advance at maximum speed through the gap. It's our only chance." The four remaining Shermans opened fire simultaneously on the lead Panther. At this range, their 75-millimeter guns had little hope of penetrating its frontal armor. But the concentrated fire forced the German tank commander to button up, reducing his visibility and accuracy. "Driver, forward, full speed," Harrison ordered. "Head straight for the lead Panther. Everyone else follow." Thunderbolt II surged forward, accelerating toward the German tank. It was a desperate gambit, the Sherman's 30-ton weight against the Panther's 45 tons. But surprise and momentum might work in their favor. The distance closed rapidly. The Panther fired again, but the shot went high, passing over the Sherman's turret. Then they were upon it. The impact was tremendous. The Sherman's front slope, striking the Panther's right track assembly with all its momentum. Metal screamed against metal as the German tank's track was partially dislodged, forcing it to lurch to one side. "Keep going," Harrison shouted as Miller fought to maintain control of their tank through the collision. "Push through!" Thunderbolt II ground forward, pushing past the damaged Panther. The other Shermans followed, pouring machine gun fire into the German tank to keep its crew suppressed. They broke through the encirclement and accelerated across the open ground beyond, zigzagging to present difficult targets as shells from the remaining Panthers fell around them. "Collins, your tank is smoking," Harrison called over the radio. "Status?" "Hit in the engine compartment," came the tense reply. "Losing power but still mobile. We'll make it." For the next 10 minutes, they raced across country, using every feature of the terrain for cover. The Panthers, one immobilized by the collision and the other slowed by their need to maintain formation, gradually fell behind. Finally, they reached a small stream with steep banks, not impassable but enough of an obstacle to give them breathing space. Harrison ordered a halt to assess their situation. The four Shermans had made it, though Collins' tank was in poor shape, its engine compartment still smoldering, despite the crew's efforts to extinguish the fire. One tank lost, 4 damaged to varying degrees, but most of the crews were intact. Given what they had faced, it was something of a miracle. "Captain Reynolds, Harrison," he radioed once they were relatively secure. "We've broken contact with enemy armor, but have sustained casualties. 1 tank lost, 1 heavily damaged. Request immediate support." "Support is on the way," Harrison, Reynolds replied. "Artillery is now ranging the area you just left. Hold position and we'll have reinforcements to you within the hour." As they waited, Harrison climbed down from his turret to check on Collins and his crew. The sergeant was helping his driver extinguish the last of the flames with a fire extinguisher, his face streaked with soot. "That was some driving back there, Lieutenant," Collins said, a new respect evident in his voice. "Never seen anyone ram a Panther before." "Desperate times," Harrison replied. "We wouldn't have made it otherwise." Collins nodded, then grew serious. "Wilson's tank got hit bad. Any word on survivors?" Harrison shook his head. "The ammunition went up. I don't think anyone got out." They stood in silence for a moment, acknowledging the loss. 4 more men who wouldn't be going home. 4 more letters to be written to families back in the States. The distant rumble of artillery broke the moment. American guns were now pounding the area they had fled, targeting the German armor that had ambushed them. "War goes on," Collins said quietly. Harrison nodded. "It does, and so do we." He climbed back into Thunderbolt II, checking on his own crew. They were shaken but intact, already performing essential maintenance to prepare for the next phase of their withdrawal. "What's the word, Lieutenant?" Rodriguez asked, looking up from reloading the ammunition rack. "Support's coming," Harrison replied. "We hold here, then fall back to the main force." And then, Harrison's gaze turned toward the distant horizon, toward Paris, toward Germany, toward the long road that still lay ahead. "Then we keep going, all the way to Berlin if that's what it takes." Chapter 12, The Price of Victory. Paris fell on August 25, 1944, liberated by French and American forces after 4 years of German occupation. The news reached Harrison's platoon as they rested and refitted at a rear area maintenance depot, their tanks undergoing much-needed repairs after the engagement at the Seine. "Wish we could have been there," Chen said wistfully as they gathered around a radio broadcasting the reports of jubilant crowds filling the streets of the French capital. "Be grateful we're alive to hear about it," Donovan replied pragmatically. "Plenty didn't make it this far." Harrison understood both perspectives. They had been fighting continuously since D-Day, nearly 3 months of constant combat with only brief interludes for rest and repair. Every man in the platoon had seen friends killed, tanks destroyed, the brutal reality of mechanized warfare up close. And yet, they had accomplished something meaningful. France was being liberated village by village, town by town, city by city. The Nazi occupation that had seemed unbreakable 2 years ago was collapsing under the weight of Allied military power. There was, at last, a sense that the war might have an end. Captain Reynolds found Harrison inspecting the repairs to Thunderbolt II's track assembly, which had been damaged during their escape from the Panthers. "Got new orders," Reynolds said without preamble. "We're being reassigned to 3rd Army, Patton's outfit. They're making a push toward Germany, and they need experienced tank commanders." Harrison wiped grease from his hands. "When do we move out?" 2 days. Your platoon will receive replacement tanks and crews for your losses. You'll be back up to full strength, 5 tanks. And then? Then you join the race to the German border." Reynolds handed him a folder of maps and orders. "Study these. Your new sector will be challenging. More urban terrain, less room for maneuver." After Reynolds departed, Harrison gathered his core crew, Donovan, Rodriguez, Miller, and Chen. They had been together since England, through every battle, every crisis, every moment of terror and triumph. They weren't just a tank crew anymore. They were family. "3rd Army," he told them. "Patton. Old blood and guts himself," Rodriguez said with a low whistle. "Man doesn't believe in taking it slow." "He believes in winning," Miller countered, "pushing hard, keeping the Germans off balance." Harrison spread the maps on the tank's hull. "Our new sector is here, approaching the German border near Metz. Heavily fortified, part of the old Maginot Line. It won't be easy." "It never is," Donovan said quietly. They spent the next 2 days preparing, maintaining their equipment, studying maps, briefing the new tank commanders who would join the platoon. Harrison was particularly concerned about integrating the replacements. Combat veterans had developed instincts and procedures that kept them alive. Newcomers would need time to learn, time they might not have in the intensity of Patton's advance. On the morning of August 28th, they departed for their new assignment. Thunderbolt II led the column, its battle damage repaired, but still visible in the patched armor and mismatched paint. Like the men who crewed it, the tank bore the scars of its journey. The transfer to 3rd Army was completed 2 days later at a forward assembly area near Reims. The difference in atmosphere was immediately noticeable. Where their previous unit had maintained a certain deliberate caution, Patton's command radiated aggressive confidence. Everyone moved faster, spoke more assertively, conveyed the sense that the war's end was not just possible but imminent. Harrison reported to his new battalion commander, Major Lawrence Wilson, a career officer with a reputation for demanding excellence and rewarding initiative. "Harrison," Wilson acknowledged, reviewing his service record, "I've heard good things. Saint-Lô, the Seine crossing. You've seen your share of action." "Yes, sir." "Good, because we're about to see plenty more." Wilson indicated a large wall map showing the front lines. 3rd Army is pushing hard for the Moselle River. Once across, we're into Germany itself. The Krauts know this, so they're finally committing their reserves, including some of their best SS Panzer divisions. Harrison studied the map, noting the terrain features, road networks, and reported enemy positions. "What's my platoon's role, sir?" "You'll be attached to the Baker Company, 66th Armor. Your primary mission is route reconnaissance and flank security. Captain Harding will brief you on the specifics." Wilson fixed Harrison with a direct stare. "I'll be blunt, Lieutenant. We're moving fast, and we're stretching our supply lines to do it. That means limited artillery support, limited air cover, and absolutely no room for hesitation. If you encounter enemy forces, you engage decisively and you win. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, sir." The offensive began the following morning. Harrison's platoon, now designated Sabre Platoon, in the new command structure, advanced along the left flank of Baker Company, screening the main force as it pushed eastward. The terrain was more challenging than the open countryside they had traversed after breaking out of Normandy. More forests, more hills, more places for defenders to establish ambush positions. They covered nearly 20 miles on the first day, encountering only token resistance, the occasional sniper, a few roadblocks quickly abandoned when American armor appeared. It was the calm before the storm, and every veteran in the platoon knew it. The storm broke on the third day. They were approaching a small town called WWII, about 15 miles west of the Moselle River, when the lead elements of Baker Company reported contact with German armor. "Sabre platoon, Captain Harding," the radio crackled with urgency. "Multiple enemy tanks, Panzer IVs and Panthers, vicinity of WWII, move to support our right flank, prevent encirclement." "Understood," Harrison acknowledged. "Moving now." He directed his platoon onto a parallel road that would bring them to the engagement area from the south, potentially catching the German armor in a crossfire. As they approached, the sounds of battle intensified. The sharp crack of tank guns, the deeper thump of artillery, the constant chatter of machine guns. Cresting a small rise, Harrison could see the situation below. Baker Company's Shermans were engaged with a roughly equal number of German tanks along the western edge of WWII. The American tanks were holding their own, but German infantry with Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons were working their way through buildings on the company's right flank, threatening to turn the tide. "All tanks target those infantry positions," Harrison ordered. "He rounds, suppress them while our infantry moves up." The 5 Shermans opened fire, sending high explosive shells into the buildings where the German infantry sheltered. The effects were immediate. The anti-tank teams pulled back, giving Baker Company's tanks room to maneuver. For the next hour, the battle seesawed back and forth. The German force, comprising elements of the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division, was skilled and determined. But the Americans had the advantage of superior numbers and, increasingly, air support as P-47 Thunderbolts arrived to strafe and bomb the German positions. Harrison's platoon remained on the flank, preventing any German attempt to encircle the main American force. They engaged targets of opportunity, a Panzer IV attempting to redeploy, infantry moving between buildings, a self-propelled gun trying to establish a firing position. By mid-afternoon, the German resistance began to crumble. Their remaining tanks withdrew into the town itself, using the buildings for cover. American infantry advanced cautiously, clearing structures one by one. "Sabre actual, Captain Harding." The radio came to life again. "German forces are withdrawing to the east. Your platoon is to pursue and harass, prevent them from establishing new defensive positions. Battalion is sending Baker Company to support once they've secured the town." "Understood," Harrison replied. "Pursuing now." He led his platoon around the southern edge of WWII, bypassing the urban combat still occurring in its streets. The road eastward was a secondary road that wound through rolling hills and small woodlots, ideal terrain for a retreating force to establish ambush positions. Harrison maintained a cautious pace, rotating the lead tank position and keeping the platoon dispersed to minimize the impact of any surprise engagement. His caution proved justified when they rounded a bend to find the road blocked by a disabled German half-track, positioned to channel them into a kill zone. "All tanks, halt," he ordered immediately. "Possible ambush ahead." Through his binoculars, Harrison surveyed the surrounding terrain. The half-track was positioned at a point where the road ran through a narrow defile, with wooded hills on both sides. Perfect positions for concealed anti-tank guns. "Too convenient," he muttered. "Collins, take your tank and circle north through that draw. Taylor, go south. Rest of us will provide overwatch. Report any signs of enemy positions." The 2 Shermans detached from the formation, moving carefully through the broken terrain to flank the suspected ambush position. Harrison kept the remaining 3 tanks in cover positions, their guns trained on likely enemy locations. After 15 tense minutes, Collins radioed back. "Sabre actual, Collins. Confirmed enemy positions on the North Ridge. 2 anti-tank guns, camouflaged, with infantry support. They're dug in facing the road." "Taylor here," came the second report. "Same situation on the south side. Looks like a classic ambush setup. They're waiting for us to approach that disabled half-track." Harrison considered their options. A frontal assault would be costly, but they couldn't simply bypass the position. The terrain was too restrictive, and the German guns would dominate the road behind them, threatening the follow-on forces. "New plan," he decided. "Collins, Taylor, engage the anti-tank positions from your current locations. The rest of us will advance once they're suppressed. Time on target in 2 minutes." He synchronized watches with the detached tanks, ensuring they would open fire simultaneously. Surprise and coordinated fire would be essential to neutralizing the threat before the German crews could effectively respond. All Sabre elements engage! The 5 Shermans opened fire as one, their 75mm guns targeting the camouflaged German positions. The effect was devastating. Caught in a crossfire they hadn't anticipated, the German anti-tank crews had no time to traverse their guns or seek better cover. Within minutes, both positions were neutralized, with the German infantry retreating eastward. Harrison's platoon reformed and continued their pursuit, now even more vigilant for similar tactics. They maintained contact with the retreating German forces until nightfall, when Baker Company caught up and they established a defensive perimeter about 10 miles east of WWII. The day's action had been successful, the German counterattack repulsed, their withdrawal harassed, and the American advance maintained. As Harrison completed his after-action report by flashlight, he was summoned to Captain Harding's command tank for a briefing on the next day's operations. "Good work today, Harrison," Harding acknowledged as they gathered around a map spread on the tank's rear deck. "Your platoon's flanking action at WWII made a significant difference." "Thank you, sir. My men performed well. They'll need to keep performing well. Intelligence reports the Germans are preparing major defensive positions along the Moselle. We'll reach the river sometime tomorrow, and we expect heavy resistance." Harrison studied the map, noting the terrain features and reported enemy positions. The Moselle River presented a significant natural obstacle, and the Germans were certain to defend it vigorously. "What's our approach, sir?" "Your platoon will advance along this axis." Harding indicated a route that would bring them to the river near a small town called Pont-à-Mousson. Initial reports suggest a bridge may still be intact there. If so, securing it would be a significant advantage. The briefing continued, covering coordination with artillery, air support, and infantry elements. When it concluded, Harrison returned to Thunderbolt 2, where his crew waited for updates. "What's the word, Lieutenant?" Miller asked as Harrison approached. "We're reaching the Moselle tomorrow. Possible intact bridge at Pont-à-Mousson. The Germans will defend it hard," Donovan predicted. "Rivers are natural defensive barriers. That's why we need to move fast, try to secure it before they can destroy it." Harrison checked his watch. "Get some rest. We move at dawn." As the others bedded down for what sleep they could find, Harrison remained by the tank, gazing eastward toward where the Moselle, and beyond it, Germany itself awaited. They had come so far since those tense days in the Normandy hedgerows. Thousands of miles, hundreds of engagements, countless moments of terror and triumph. How many more lay ahead before this war was truly won? The question lingered, unanswerable, as he finally sought his own rest beneath the stars of a France nearly liberated, on the doorstep of the enemy's homeland. National Armor Museum, Washington, D.C., 2001. The afternoon light slanted through the high windows of the museum, casting the same golden rectangles across the polished floor that had greeted Colonel William Harrison when he first arrived that morning. Now, as closing time approached, the crowds had thinned, leaving him alone with the Sherman M4A3E8 that had been the focal point of his interview with the Georgetown University students. "Grandfather, are you ready to go?" Harrison turned to see his grandson, Michael, a tall young man of 22, the same age Harrison had been when he first climbed into a Sherman's turret in 1943. The symmetry wasn't lost on him. "Just a moment, Michael. One last look." Michael joined him beside the tank, studying the olive-drab behemoth with the curiosity of someone who had grown up hearing stories about it but was still trying to understand its significance. "Did they get what they needed, the students?" Harrison nodded. "I think so. They seemed interested, though I'm not sure they truly understood." "How could they?" Michael rested a hand on his grandfather's shoulder. "They didn't live it." Harrison's weathered hand reached out to touch the tank's track one last time. The steel was cool and smooth beneath his fingers, so different from the mud-caked, grease-stained tracks he had known during the war. "You know, I've been coming to see her for nearly 30 years, he said quietly. "Ever since they put her on display here in '75. Used to bring your father when he was a boy." Michael nodded. "Dad told me, said you'd spend hours just looking at it. Not just looking, remembering." Harrison's eyes took on the distant look that his family had come to recognize whenever the war was mentioned. The men, the sounds, the fear, all of it. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, grandfather and grandson, the living embodiment of the continuum that stretched from World War II to the present day. "Did you ever find out what happened to them?" Michael asked eventually. "The others? Your crew?" Harrison smiled faintly. "Some of them. Donovan went back to Montana, became a park ranger in Glacier National Park. Lived there until he passed in '89. Rodriguez started a garage in San Antonio, had 6 kids. We exchanged Christmas cards until his heart gave out in '93. He paused, the memories both sweet and painful. Miller went back to Detroit, worked for Ford until retirement. Last I heard, he was still living down in Florida somewhere. Chen was the surprise. Used his GI Bill to finish his engineering degree, ended up working for NASA during the Apollo program. And Collins? Harrison's expression softened. Patrick Collins started as a thorn in my side, became one of the best friends I ever had. Took over his family's construction business in Baltimore after the war. We stayed close until he died in '85. Cancer. He didn't mention how he had held Collins' hand in the hospital during those final days, how they had reminisced about the war, about Thunderbolt and Avenger, about the men they had lost and those they had saved. Some memories were too personal to share, even with family. And Thompson, you mentioned him in your stories. Harrison's face clouded. David Thompson, lost at the Seine crossing. His tank was hit by a Panther, went up with all hands. He had a young wife back in Pennsylvania. I wrote to her afterward, tried to tell her how brave he was. He shook his head. Never knew if it helped or just made it worse. Michael, sensing the shift in mood, gently steered the conversation elsewhere. The students seemed especially interested in your breakthrough at St. Lo. Everyone focuses on the big battles, the dramatic moments. Harrison's voice took on a teacher's cadence. But the war wasn't won in a single day or a single battle. It was thousands of small actions, decisions, sacrifices. Every hedgerow breached, every bridge secured, every German tank destroyed brought us one step closer to the end. Like your rhinoceros device, Michael prompted. The tank modification you created. Harrison chuckled. Miller created it, not me. I just had the sense to listen to him. That was the real lesson of command. Recognizing that leadership wasn't about having all the answers yourself. It was about bringing together people's strengths, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. A museum attendant approached, politely informing them that closing time was approaching. Harrison nodded his acknowledgement, but didn't move immediately. One more minute, he requested softly. When the attendant had moved away, Harrison turned to his grandson. There's something I've never shown anyone, not even your grandmother. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small, worn notebook. My wartime journal. I kept it from the day I was promoted to tank commander until VE Day. Michael looked at the weathered notebook with a mixture of surprise and reverence. Why are you showing me now? Because you asked the right question this morning, the one none of those university students thought to ask. Harrison held the journal out to his grandson. You asked why we kept going, day after day, knowing what we faced. Michael accepted the notebook carefully. And this has the answer? It has my answer. Every man who fought had to find his own. Harrison turned back to the tank, his gaze distant once more. When we reached the Moselle in August of war, I thought the war might end quickly. But then came the fuel shortages, the German counterattacks, the bitter winter fighting. By the time we crossed into Germany in March of '45, I'd lost 2 more tanks and 7 more men. He spoke now not to Michael specifically, but to the memories themselves, giving voice to experiences he had held close for decades. The Rhine crossing was the worst. We were supporting the 9th Infantry Division, clearing the eastern bank. A German 88 hit Taylor's tank. Lieutenant Robert Taylor took over Collins' position after Collins was wounded at the Siegfried Line. Taylor and his whole crew gone in an instant. The clarification about Taylor came naturally, filling in a gap in the narrative he had shared with the students earlier that day. After that came the race across Germany, town after town, some resisting fanatically, others surrendering without a fight. By then, Thunderbolt was held together by spare parts and prayer. The original gun barrel had been replaced twice. The transmission made noises that would have given my father nightmares. Michael stood silently, recognizing the importance of letting his grandfather speak uninterrupted. We reached the Elbe River on April 24th, 1945. That's where we stopped, under orders. The agreement was that the Soviets would take Berlin. A flash of the old fire returned to Harrison's eyes. We could have gone all the way to Berlin ourselves. Patton wanted to, but politics intervened. He fell silent for a moment, then continued more softly. Maybe it was for the best. More men would have died, on both sides, for a symbolic victory when the real victory was already assured. What happened to Thunderbolt? Michael asked. The actual tank you commanded? Thunderbolt 3 was shipped back to the States after the war, used for training at Fort Knox until the early 50s. After that, scrapped, I imagine, like thousands of others. The Sherman you're looking at isn't my tank, though it's the same model. Harrison patted the hull affectionately. But in a way, they were all my tank. We rotated through so many as they were damaged and replaced. A gentle chime announced the museum's imminent closing. This time, Harrison nodded decisively. Time to go. As they walked toward the exit, Michael carefully tucked the journal into his own jacket. I'll take good care of this, grandfather. I know you will. Harrison's pace was slow but steady, his posture still military straight despite his years. Read it when you're ready. It's not just about the battles. It's about the letters from home that kept us going. Rodriguez receiving news of his first child's birth while we were in the Ardennes. Miller getting a package of engine parts from his father that saved Thunderbolt when official supplies were delayed. Chen's weekly letters to his mother, always assuring her he was safe, even when we were in the thick of it. They stepped outside into the fading daylight of Washington, D.C., the modern world a stark contrast to the historical sanctuary they had just left. And your letters? Michael asked. To grandmother? Harrison's face softened. We weren't married then. Margaret and I had only been on 3 dates before I shipped out. But she wrote to me every week without fail, told me about her work at the aircraft factory, about the victory gardens she planted, about the books she was reading. And you wrote back, whenever I could, told her about the French countryside, the Belgian villages, the German towns, the beauty that somehow survived amidst the destruction. Never about the fighting, never about the men we lost. Harrison's voice grew distant. She saved every letter, showed them to me on our 50th anniversary, tied with a blue ribbon. Said those letters were how she knew I was the man she wanted to spend her life with. They reached the car, Michael moving to open the passenger door for his grandfather. One last thing, Harrison said before getting in. When you read the journal, you'll find entries about the dreams. All of us had them. Dreams of home, of safety, of peace. But we also had dreams of what might come after, the world we were fighting to create. Michael nodded, understanding the weight of what his grandfather was sharing. For me, it was the garage I would open with your grandmother. For Donovan, it was the cabin he would build in the Montana wilderness. For Rodriguez, the family he would raise. For Miller, the cars he would design. For Chen, the buildings he would engineer. Harrison's eyes held his grandson's. Those dreams kept us going when nothing else could. The belief that there was a future worth fighting for. As they drove away from the museum, the Sherman tank receding in the rearview mirror, Harrison felt a sense of completion. The story had been told, not just to the eager young students with their digital recorders and academic questions, but to the one person who might truly understand its deeper meaning, not just what the war had been, but what it had meant to the men who fought it. The long road from Normandy to the Elbe, from youth to old age, was marked by sacrifice and loss, by courage and camaraderie. But it was also marked by hope, the unquenchable human hope that tomorrow might be better than today, that something worthwhile would emerge from the crucible of conflict. That hope, more than any weapon or strategy, had been the true legacy of Thunderbolt and its crew. And now, at last, the story was complete. Additional clarifications and improvements for the main narrative. Note: the following sections are not part of the epilogue, but provide clarifications and improvements to be incorporated into the main 3 parts of the story. 1. Clarification of Taylor's character. In Part 3, add this paragraph during the introduction of Harrison's platoon being reassigned to 3rd Army. Lieutenant Robert Taylor had joined the platoon as a replacement tank commander after their engagement at the Seine. A former insurance adjuster from Chicago with a methodical mind and steady nerves, Taylor had quickly adapted to combat operations. His tank, codenamed Warhammer, took position on Harrison's right flank as they prepared for their first assignment under Patton's command. 2. Differentiating the battle scenarios. To reduce the similarity between battle scenes, modify the Tiger engagement in St. Lo Part 3 as follows. Replace the ambush and artillery solution with Harrison studied the church square through his binoculars. The Tiger was using the building for cover, exposing only its turret and gun when firing at American positions. We can't get a clean shot from here, he told his crew, and artillery might damage the church, which we've been ordered to preserve if possible. So what's the plan, Lieutenant? Rodriguez asked, already loading an armor-piercing round in anticipation. Harrison considered their options. The narrow streets prevented traditional flanking maneuvers, and the Tiger's position was well chosen to maximize its field of fire while minimizing its exposure. We're going to use the buildings, he decided. Miller, take us 3 blocks east, then north. There's a bell tower there that should give us a height advantage. The Sherman maneuvered through the rubble-strewn streets until they reached the designated bell tower, a partially damaged church with its tower still intact. Chen Rodriguez, help me with the demolition charge, Harrison ordered as he climbed down from the tank. Working quickly, they assembled a satchel charge using explosives from their combat engineering kit. Harrison led the way into the church and up the damaged stairs of the bell tower. If my calculations are right, he said as they reached the top, that wall faces directly toward the Tiger's position. We blow this section, it creates a clear line of sight for Donovan. They set the charge, retreated to a safe distance, and triggered the explosion. As the dust settled, a ragged hole appeared in the tower wall, offering a perfect elevated firing position overlooking the church square. Miller, bring Thunderbolt into position beneath the tower, Harrison radioed. Donovan, you'll have a top-down shot at the Tiger's thinner roof armor. The Sherman carefully positioned itself beneath the tower. From this angle, with the elevation provided by the tower's height, they had a clear view of the Tiger's top deck, its most vulnerable point. Fire when ready, Harrison ordered. Donovan's shot struck the Tiger's roof squarely, penetrating the thinner armor and igniting the ammunition stored inside. The German tank erupted in flames as its crew frantically attempted to escape. Additional personal elements and homefront connections. Add the following scenes to develop the personal aspects of the characters. In Part 1, after the D-Day landing, as the crew performed maintenance on Thunderbolt that evening, Rodriguez produced a worn envelope from his breast pocket. Got this right before we shipped out, he said, unfolding a letter. Maria's expecting a baby, due in December. Congratulations, Harrison said warmly. Boy or girl? Don't know yet, hoping for a boy. Rodriguez grinned. Someone to take over the garage I'm going to open after we finish this mess. You're a mechanic? Miller asked, looking up from the track he was adjusting. No, but I will be. Taking courses on the GI Bill when I get home. Rodriguez's expression grew determined. No more working in someone else's shop. My own place, my name on the sign. The others shared their own plans. Miller returning to Detroit's automotive industry with new ideas for engine designs. Chen finishing his engineering degree. Donovan building a cabin in the Montana wilderness. Harrison listened, saying little about his own aspirations. For him, the future remained a hazy concept, secondary to the immediate responsibility of keeping these men alive through the days ahead. In Part 2, during the lull after defeating the Panther, mail call brought a moment of normalcy to their combat routine. Chen received a package of homemade almond cookies from his mother, which he generously shared. Miller got a letter from his father containing a small, custom machine part for the Sherman's bulky transmission, something the official supply chain couldn't provide. Your dad made this? Harrison asked, examining the precision component. Yep. Told him about the transmission issues in my last letter. He worked on tanks in the last war, figured the basic designs hadn't changed that much. Miller held the part up proudly. This'll keep us running when the standard parts fail. Harrison marveled at the connection between homefront and battlefield, the invisible threads of support that stretched across the Atlantic. His own letter was from Margaret, the girl he'd taken to just 3 dances before shipping out. She wrote about her work at the aircraft factory, about the victory gardens she'd planted, about the books she read in rare moments of leisure. No talk of love or commitment. They barely knew each other after all. But a steadiness, a reliability in her correspondence that anchored him in ways he couldn't quite articulate. You writing her back? Donovan asked, noticing Harrison's absorption in the letter. Tonight, Harrison nodded. Need to find the right words. Just tell her the truth, Donovan suggested. Then seeing Harrison's skeptical expression, he clarified. Not about the fighting, about France, the countryside, the villages, the good things you see. That's what they want to know. That we can still see beauty, even here. 4. Modify the strategy against the Panthers in Part 3. To further differentiate battle tactics, change the encounter with the Panthers as follows. We can't outgun them, Harrison assessed quickly, and we're caught in the open. The situation seemed hopeless. The Panthers had them outgunned, out-armored, and potentially surrounded. Conventional tactics would lead to their destruction. Lieutenant, look at the terrain, Miller said urgently. That ridge to the south, it's a steep grade. Harrison saw it immediately, a sharply rising hillside with loose scree and shale. too steep for the heavy German tanks to traverse safely, but potentially navigable by the lighter, more agile Shermans. "All tanks, make for that hillside," he ordered. "Maximum speed, we're going to climb it." The four Shermans broke into a sprint toward the ridge, engines straining as they pushed to their top speed. The Panthers, seeing their prey attempting to escape, gave chase, their 75mm guns firing on the move. A shell struck close to Collins's tank, showering it with dirt but causing no serious damage. Another whistled over Harrison's turret as Miller executed an evasive pattern. They reached the base of the ridge and began to climb without hesitation. The Sherman's tracks bit into the loose surface, struggling for purchase but maintaining forward momentum. Behind them, the lead Panther attempted to follow, but its greater weight caused it to slide sideways on the unstable surface. "They can't follow," Chen called out, watching through his viewport as the German tanks struggled with the terrain. "Keep climbing," Harrison ordered. "Don't stop until we're over the crest." The Shermans labored up the steep incline, engines howling in protest, tracks spitting rocks and soil. Below, the Panthers continued to fire, their shells now passing overhead as they struggled to elevate their guns sufficiently to target the climbing American tanks. Finally, Thunderbolt II crested the ridge, the other Shermans close behind. Only Collins's tank was still struggling, its engine smoking from the exertion. "Collins, status," Harrison radioed. "Engine's overheating, but we'll make it," came the strained reply. "Just need another minute." Below, the Germans had given up on the direct pursuit. Two Panthers were withdrawing, likely to seek an alternate route around the ridge. But one remained, its commander apparently determined to prevent the Americans' escape. "They're not all following," Harrison observed. "That gives us an opportunity. Miller, position us just below the crest. Donovan, prepare to engage the remaining Panther from hull-down position." Thunderbolt II backed carefully to a firing position where only its turret was exposed over the ridgeline. The German tank below, frustrated by its inability to climb, was attempting to traverse laterally across the slope to find a better firing angle. "Target the track on the uphill side," Harrison instructed. "If we disable it on that gradient, it'll roll," Donovan finished, already making the adjustment. On the way, the Sherman's gun roared, sending an armor-piercing round into the Panther's left track assembly. The shell struck true, shattering track links and damaging the drive sprocket. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Deprived of traction on its uphill side while on the steep slope, the 50-ton German tank began to slide sideways, then roll. It gained momentum as it tumbled down the ridge, finally coming to rest at the bottom, its turret twisted at an unnatural angle, smoke pouring from its engine compartment. "Target neutralized," Donovan reported with professional detachment that belied the spectacular nature of the kill. By then, Collins's tank had successfully crested the ridge, joining the others in relative safety. "All tanks accounted for," Harrison confirmed. "Well done, everyone. Let's put some distance between us and those remaining Panthers." These additions and modifications address the issues identified in the review, while maintaining the overall narrative flow and character development established in the original three parts. The epilogue provides a satisfying conclusion to the story, connecting the wartime experiences to their long-term impact on the survivors in the next generation.